All right, I'd like to call the business meeting of the Portland Board of Public Education to order. It is Tuesday, January 17th, 2023. We are meeting in a blended format with some of us here at Casco Bay and others on Zoom. I will note we've got several members who are feeling ill, but are still calling in from home. And myself, I'm recovering from a cold. I think it's a cold, so that's why I'm masked tonight. But let's see, Superintendent Townsend, would you please call the roll?
Great. Member Bill Yu. Member Bondo.
Présent.
Member Bryden.
Here.
Member Figdor.
Here.
Member Grant.
Here.
Member Opperman.
Present.
Member Russell Better.
Here.
Member Youssef. Ms. Ellis.
Here.
Ms. Francisco. Mr. Haymond.
Here.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Here.
Ms. Santiago. And Chair Lentz.
Here. Thank you, Superintendent Townsend. Now the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Portland Public Schools recognizes the original inhabitants of the land on which our city and schools stand. The Wolastoqiyik, or Maliseet, Micmac, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy tribes, known collectively as the Wabanaki Confederacy, or People of the Dawnland. We're honored to have Wabanaki children among our students today, and as a district, we are committed to making the past, present, and future of Wabanaki peoples visible in our schools and classrooms. We're now going to move into public comment. So as a reminder with public comment, it's open to anything that we're not voting on tonight. And the board may not respond to any comments, and please refrain from responding in the audience. There's no complaints or allegations allowed in public concerning any staff member or any person connected with the school district. And to give public comment, you can come forward to the podium or raise your hand in Zoom. Please begin by introducing yourself with your name and address. And I'll alternate between Zoom and here in person, and then you'll have 3 minutes. I'll keep the time, and when you've reached 2 minutes and 30 seconds, I'll raise a yellow folder indicating you have 30 seconds remaining. At 3 minutes, I'll raise a red folder signifying the end of your time. If you get to the end of your allotted time and would like to request more time, you may do so. All right. Go ahead, Carrie and Jen.
Sure. Hi, Carrie Dowdy, Portland Education Association, 27 Fleetwood Street, Portland, Maine.
Jen Cooper, Ed Tech President.
You don't have to give your address. Thank you. We are speaking tonight to welcome new superintendents Nally and Townsend. Welcome. And to unequivocally state the PEA's continued commitment to the Portland Promise. The Portland Education Association is an umbrella collective bargaining unit representing many diverse impact areas across the district. We are, and forgive me because I'm going to list a bunch of people out, educational technicians, core subject and classroom teachers, counselors and social workers, nurses, interpreters, student enrichment coordinators, librarians, physical therapists, occupational therapists, school psychologists, and those providing special education services to students in classroom settings, as well as in specialized programs. And if I forgot anyone, it is not on purpose. In this moment, we would like to read the 4 goals of the Portland Promise, which is often mentioned and referred to, but not often explicitly stated.
Oh, goal 1, achievement. All PPS students will be prepared for college and career and empowered to pursue a productive, post-secondary path. Goal 2, equity. PPS is vigilant in supporting each and every student particular path to achieving high standards, rooting out systematic and ongoing inequities. Whole student. All PPS students will develop the skills, habits, and mindsets they need to engage in and contribute to the diverse city and ever-changing world and people. Portland Public Schools attracts, supports, and retains talented and diverse people who use their strengths to achieve our shared goals.
The PEA looks forward to continuing our work together, this work, and to collectively move the district, as Superintendent Nellie has been known to say, onward.
Thank you, Jen and Carrie. Is there anyone else that would like to give public comment?
Hello,
Hi there.
my name is Kat Castro. I have been asked by a friend to stand up and speak today, to advocate for them. And it's really just a comment that I would like to have addressed, witnessed, and for everyone to contemplate. In a climate where LGBTQ plus rights are under attack in schools across the country, we as members of the LGBTQ plus community and our allies demand that the Portland School Board ensure that the Portland Public Schools protect the safety and civil liberties of its LGBTQ plus students, faculty, and staff. Equity means equity for everyone, and hate has no place in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room that would like to give us a comment? Okay, I'm just looking on Zoom. All right. With that, I'm going to close public comment. So I would like to say, hold on, let me turn off this so that it does not beep at us. Good evening, everyone that's here tonight and listening at home. I'd first like to welcome Superintendents Nellie and Townsend. I'm so grateful for their values-driven leadership during this time of transition, and I really look forward to working with them very closely over the next few months. I also just want to acknowledge that yesterday was Martin Luther King Day, and I hope that everyone was able to make some time to honor his legacy through reflection, learning, service, or any other type of action. There are several important events that are coming up that I'd like to call all of our attention to this Thursday from 4 to 5:30. There's going to be a staff gathering for a celebration of the legacy of Javier's work here in the district. And then from 6 to 8 p.m., it will be open to the full community so that anyone can come and celebrate his work here in the district. And that will be happening at the Rowe School. Monday, January 30th from 6:30 to 8:30 at East End School. We'll be having an open community gathering to help us inform the search for our next full-time superintendent. And that's open to anyone in the community, and we'll be breaking into small focus groups to really help inform what that role should look like. There's two other opportunities if you can't make it on the 30th. There's one on January 31st and a virtual event happening on February 2nd, all of which are 6:30 to 8:30. Interpretation will be provided at each of those events. Additionally, at the end of this week, a community survey is going to be launched, and this is going to be open to anyone residing in Portland to take. And I think you probably noticed in a lot of my updates, I've been giving a lot of information about the superintendent search. And hopefully it's tomorrow or the next day that there's going to be a web page on our website that will hold all of this information so it can be shared easily, and folks can find the link to the survey, the link to all the upcoming events, and the ways to participate in this search. As I've mentioned before, our biggest goal with this search is to make sure that it's informed by the community to the maximum degree. So please watch out on our social media to find out more information about that. Then, as also promised in our last meeting, I wanted to give an update today on Board Member Grant's service on the board as he has moved into his new role with the Maine Education Association, or MEA. I've continued to work closely with legal counsel and expect to have an executive session scheduled for the February 7th board meeting to go over the full boundaries of Board Member Grant's service. But in the meantime, per council's recommendation, we'll be moving, and Ben is in agreement and has been in these conversations as well. He'll be moving off Finance Committee and will be moved onto Public Affairs and Appointments, and I'll be moving from Public Affairs to Finance Committee. Board members Bryden and Opperman led a great, and there's Bryden is not here, but Opperman is there. Thank you. Led a great finance committee meeting last week, which really started us into the budgeting process. We'll soon be communicating the full schedule of meetings, both with our own committee and the joint meetings with the city, so that community members can participate in this incredibly important process. Board member, tonight we are lucky to have a report of one of our student representatives. So I'm going to turn over to Representative Danny McLaughlin from PATH, Portland Arts and Technology High School, for your report. Thanks, Danny.
Since January 1st, PATH has visited and presented to all students at all sending schools for next year's class. PATH has scheduled 485 student visits thus far for the upcoming school year. In total, PATH has an opening for 283 students for the incoming class, meaning that the student to open spot ratio is about 2 to 1. So unfortunately, not all students waiting to attend will be able to. However, we hope to give as many people the opportunity to attend as possible. Also, PATH is proud to be a school where students can have concurrent enrollment with colleges, meaning that the skills and certifications that they learn here at PATH will transfer over to colleges such as SMCC and CMCC and many others. Also, this will be on their official transcript. A good example of this is a student in the Careers and Education class this year will graduate PATH with 16 college credits, 6 of which were obtained here at PATH, and all of those credits are going on their official transcript for college. In other news, PATH students are preparing for Skills USA, which is a career and technical competition. Programs are practicing for the upcoming competition, and some programs are soon going to be holding in-house competitions to see who will be representing PATH when the time comes. Finally, PATH attendance is looking very good with all students in a very positive routine, and all students are working towards their certifications in their respective programs. Thank you, and that concludes my report.
That was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, and really excited to hear all of those updates. Okay, and now I'm going to turn it over to superintendents.
Great. Good evening. Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin, for that report around the work at PATHs. You guys do wonderful work downstairs here and across the campus, so thank you. Good evening, everyone, and good evening to the Portland Public Schools community. I want to begin our update this evening with acknowledging yesterday's Martin Luther King holiday. As always, his life and vision are an inspiration to us as we march ahead in our work together to build a more just and equitable community within our district. As Co-Superintendent Nolly and I have shared in our transition, we recognize that we are at a difficult moment in the history of PPS. The ongoing impacts of the pandemic on our students, our families, and our staff within a context of systemic racism and oppression make this a very challenging time. This is why one of our priorities for our interim tenure is to directly address issues of trust and culture so that we can deliver on the Portland promise for our students and families. As Dr. King said in his I Have a Dream speech, we cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. We appreciate all of those who are walking with us as we move forward from this moment and deepen our collective resolve to transform the experience for students, families, and staff in our district. Now, to transition to payroll updates, to grow trust across our system, we take responsibility for writing the payroll situation and being a reliable organization for our employees. We had our most recent payroll run at the end of last week, and it was relatively successful. As of earlier this morning, we've had approximately 15 entries in the payroll concerns form that we are directing staff to use if they're experiencing recurring or new payroll issues. The majority of these involve known issues around things such as 403B accounts and other voluntary deductions. There are a small number of individual issues that our HR team will follow up on this coming week. To support staff, we are working to transition away from our case management system that we used in December to have a more efficient communication and payroll resolution system. We are in the process of analyzing all the issues that were documented in December and the late fall to inform this transition and to respond to a follow-up data request we received from the Department of Labor last week. They contacted us for the first time since their visit in December and were asking for a status update. Our council is collaborating with them on the format and timeline for our response. There are a number of other benefit-related issues in which we have made and see progress. In terms of medical and dental benefits, we corrected the instances of employees being overcharged for their medical and health benefits on the December 30th payroll run. For this most recent payroll run, we corrected the instances where employees had been undercharged for their benefits. There were 44 employees in this situation. Each received an individual communication about these adjustments prior to the payroll run to anticipate the changes in their net pay. Also, per the terms of our MOU with our bargaining partners, we will work with those individuals and their respective bargaining units to address the overpayments following the conclusion of the Spenglass audit. As for our Maine PERS and other voluntary deduction programs, such as the 403B and 457 accounts and other flexible spending accounts, we have also made progress, though we recognize it still takes some time, additional time for it to be reflected in all employees or participating employees' accounts. We have made payments to all vendors, including an estimated quarterly payment to Maine PERS for all retirement and life insurance accounts. We prioritize the reconciliation of the 403B and 457 accounts for employees, and we are up to date on those reports, having provided them through the end of December. The third-party vendor that's responsible for these is completing their work to assign these contributions to individual accounts so that they will be reflected in employees' statements. They have indicated that this is likely, as it does monthly, for them to take 10 to 15 days for it to show up in individual statements. We have also provided reconciliation reports to Maine PERS through October and continue to work on catching up with the remaining months of November and December. Lastly, we have submitted all appropriate documentation to the Maine School Management Association, the vendor for the flexible spending accounts, so that employees will have their account information updated and accurate in the near future. We have also continued to work and address on our underlying payroll staffing issues. Our first priority is to fill our two current existing vacant positions, our payroll manager and payroll specialist. Those are currently posted, and we have interviews scheduled for the payroll specialist position this coming week. Additionally, our executive director of operations, Terry Young, has continued conversations with Robert Half, a temp agency, and Tyler Technologies about their continued additional support. We got positive update from Robert Half today of our employee that has been supporting us over the past number of months is going to extend their time with us through March. So we're excited to be able to retain their support through these transitions and as we work through the backlog. Lastly, we have identified a few cross-training activities for other finance and HR staff to ensure we have multiple people who are able to run payroll with our rebuilt systems and be able to do the data entry to ensure all of the data in the system is accurate. Those training sessions will happen over the next few weeks. Lastly, we continue to follow up on leads for our ADP project manager support. We have received one proposal to date and have requested 3 others from additional vendors. We are planning a follow-up communication to all staff later this week with this information in order to provide transparency on where we stand with our efforts to resolve these issues. We regret the hardships and breach of trust that this situation has created for our staff, and we will continue to work urgently to get reliable systems in place so that staff can focus on their core passion of serving our students. I wanted to also take a moment before handing it over to Co-Superintendent Nally to talk about our high school preference and enrollment process. Friday, January 6th was the deadline for current 8th grade families to communicate their preferences for high school for next year. We began the analysis of the high school preference data from our current eighth graders last week. In terms of overall numbers, we saw relatively even distribution of preferences for students, which is encouraging. Casco Bay had 167 students indicated as their first preference. Portland High had 148 students indicate it as their first preference, and Deering had 145 students indicate it as their first preference. Additionally, at Casco Bay, the second preferences were evenly distributed between Deering and Portland. We are working on cleaning the underlying demographic data this week and doing the first analysis of those demographics so that we can be prepared to run the Casco Bay lottery. From there, we will have a clearer sense of if we would potentially need to reassign any students among Deering and Portland. Our deadline, as you know, is to communicate to families their assignments before February 6th. So thank you, and I look forward to turning it over to Co-Superintendent Nally for the rest of our update.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend. We are happy to see we have high interest in all three of our high schools, and we know that's because they all have vibrant learning communities. For example, this past weekend, Portland High School students put on a fun and engaging performance of Beauty and the Beast. They held 3 shows that were all very well attended on Saturday and Sunday. The performance was the culminating project from a popular semester-long course called musical theater. At Deering, the Black Student Union is gearing up for a speaker event later this month, during which time they are hosting South Portland Mayor Decca Dullock and Maine State Senator Jill Duson, who will share their wisdom and knowledge about their experiences with the students. This will be taking place on Friday, January 27th during Learning Center time. The annual Casco Bay March to the Post Office is scheduled for this Friday at 1:15 p.m., starting at Congress Square Park and culminating at City Hall at about 1:30. This is Casco's 10th annual college march. Casco strives for 100% of its graduates to be accepted to college and is close to that goal. So far, 98% of Casco students have been accepted to college, and all Casco seniors are expected to submit at least one college application. We hope to see many of you there. This was rescheduled due to rain on the previously scheduled date, and we are watching the weather for snow this coming Friday and will communicate any changes or updates if necessary. On that note, we are aware that there is a lot of anticipation of a potential snowstorm this coming Friday. My son has already started to lobby for a snow day to help his popularity among his peers. So this is a good chance to remind the public that we are no longer utilizing the remote learning days for inclement weather. As you may recall, we tried using remote learning as an alternative to snow days last year, given our experience with implementing remote learning throughout the pandemic. We surveyed staff about this experience after our first snow day and got mixed results about its success. Many schools also surveyed students and families, and we reviewed that data as well. This was more popular at the high school level as compared to the elementary level. Our protocol was to use the remote day when we could call the snow day at least 24 hours in advance in order to give schools and teachers an opportunity to prepare, including passing out computers, preparing remote learning assignments, sending home materials, and so forth. We had also committed to enacting this after 2 regular snow days. Ultimately, the effort to prepare for this was not inconsequential, especially at the elementary level. In addition, there was only one day that we were able to call a full 24 hours in advance, and so it turned out that it was, and most likely would continue to be, very rare to be able to pull this off. So for the remainder of this year, if there's a need to call a snow day or some other inclement weather day, we will treat it as a traditional snow day where we do not hold school and then add a day at the end of the year later in June. We are aware that for some, this is an exciting win and an opportunity for an unexpected break. And we also hold a deep awareness that for many others, it is a very challenging to manage in terms of work schedules and ensuring access to meals and services. We will always take a rigorous approach to calling a snow day, given the burden this puts on many of our families and students. In the curriculum realm, we are thrilled to share with the community that after over 5 years of a highly collaborative process with Indigenous advisors from across the Dawnland, of which Maine is a part of, we officially launched the Wabanaki Studies curriculum across all of our elementary schools this past week. Since most of our educators are not Indigenous and did not experience Wabanaki studies in their own schooling, the implementation of this curriculum requires a very deliberate approach to professional development to support our educators with new learning and unlearning around the content, in addition to learning about the units and how to teach them. The kickoff was hosted by the Portland Museum of Art with a keynote by Dr. Darren Ranko, who is the chair of Native American Studies at the University of Maine, Orono. Darren has served as one of our key advisors throughout the development of this curriculum. We plan to share more about this important and inspiring curriculum work during the February 6th board meeting. In addition, we launched the Alternatives to Suspension work group last week. This work group is being planned and co-facilitated by our Director of Mental and Behavioral Health, Dr. Chris Reiger, and by a consultant from Great Schools Partnership who has deep expertise in restorative work, Jose Bu. The work group includes educators, administrators, Make It Happen coordinators, community partners such as Portland Empowered and Maine Inside Out. This group's charge is to generate a set of recommendations for how we can continue to reduce suspensions in general and eliminate the disproportionality we see in our suspension outcomes. We anticipate final recommendations will come out of a culminating retreat being held this summer. The group will meet a little bit more than monthly between now and the summer, and we anticipate an update to the board later this spring. Finally, we also wanted to highlight that we'll be honoring Javier's legacy at a staff farewell party this coming Thursday, January 19th at 4 p.m. at Rose School, followed by a community celebration that will start at 6 p.m. at Rose School. The community party is a potluck affair, and we hope to see many of you there. And that is all for our updates this evening.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then we're going to move into, do you want to introduce the Foundation for Board?
Yes, great.
I'm sorry. I had a question. You didn't see my hand. Thank you. I have two questions. Thank you so much for the presentation, Co-Superintendent. So I have a question for Superintendent Thompson. I heard earlier you mentioned about the training of the data entry. I think I just need to have a little clarification about those are training. Those are the training, because if I remember during the Pearl crisis, what I have learned is that we had only one person among the staff who was doing the data entry for the hourly staff. And I just wonder if we had some training, like I heard you just mentioned, how many people have been trained to do the data entry, and who does the training? And my third sub-question is that's the same failed system then really came out with during the period. Are we going to continue, or is it just going to be a transition to a better system?
So in regards to the training, that is related primarily to one of the prior audit findings of what is referred to as kind of the segmentation of duties, so that there was data entry work that payroll had been doing that we are training our HR staff to be able to do. So it is members of the HR team under the leadership of Chris St. Louis, our director of HR operations, that are in the process of being trained. So that I think includes 3 or 4 staff to be able to enter benefits information and pay information into the system. So that's the training that's one of the aspects of training as well. We are going to train Terry himself, as well as the director of HR, Chris St. Louis, and our director of budget development, Miranda Fasulo, with some of the other kind of core payroll functioning systems, so that in the event somebody's sick or is not available, that we can actually run the payroll and it's not reliant on just one person. So those are the 2 training efforts we have underway. In regards to the systems transition, we continue to, there's been significant work done with our partners from Tyler Technologies around Munis to kind of rebuild many elements of our current payroll system, the Munis system. That's what we are continuing to use. We have signed the letter of intent that was shared, I think, at the last board meeting and ratified as an action with ADP to make that transition. So we expect to begin that relationship in February. And, as stated in that, to make the transition to that to be our payroll system in the, kind of next academic and fiscal year. So in July.
Okay. Can I have later on the correct number of the staff who's going to be trained? Because you mentioned 3 or 4. Can I have later on how many exactly we're going to have, really making sure that those data entry are done the way it's supposed to be? If we know it's a 3 or we know it's a 4, should be a clear number. Yes, please.
Yep.
Thank you so much. And the second one is for the Wabanaki studies. And I know I'm just so delighted to know that we already started. So I just want to know if you already get a few feedback from teachers and there's few reactions. And if it's not, when do you think that, like a length of learning and applicability of that curriculum, we can have a sense how to measure the success of that curriculum?
I heard you ask about how we're going to measure the success. And the first part of the question, was it about initial feedback from teachers?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess starting with the first question about initial feedback, the third grade teachers they went first in terms of the implementation of the unit. So they experienced training last year, and then they led the Take Me to the River unit that had culminating field work at the river with the students was really incredible. And they also have a culmination where they're going to be, they've been growing salmon. What is that?
Raising.
Like growing salmon sounds wrong. Raising salmon to release back into the river. So we're building a relationship with the land and with the water, and we're integrating the science. So our Wabanaki Studies Coordinator, Fiona Hopper, who many of you have met many times, sat with teachers at all of the schools in the third grade to get their feedback about the experience. And so she shared a summary of that feedback with our leadership team before we sort of started the launch for all grades. I think overwhelmingly it was positive. I think many teachers talked about it being one of the most engaging experiences their students had. I think high quality materials, a lot of really thoughtful professional development. And then there was also great feedback that is helping us refine and fine tune related to the field work. And that's a pretty complex operation to pull off. And I think just managing expectations and roles and responsibilities. There was also some confusion about our expectations as it relates to these units covering our literacy work during this time. And there's some fuzziness around that we had to clarify. So really great feedback about how do we make this better. But so far, I'd say really positive reception to the work overall. And then in terms of the question about measuring success, so we are building assessments into these units. So there'll be embedded assessment, which will then be able to tell us what students are learning. These units are both tied to our social studies standards, sometimes our science standards, and our literacy standards. So we'll be getting assessment information that is, helping us understand if students mastered the knowledge and the content, but also we'll be getting data on some of those literacy skills and scientific skills as well.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
That sounds good. Thank you so much. And can you keep me posted for those assessments?
Yeah, and I will make sure that we're going to do an update on February 6th to you all that's more comprehensive. So I will make sure that Fiona speaks to that assessment point during the update we do then.
Okay, I will have more questions for her. Thank you so much, Superintendent.
Beautiful. And
Thank you, Chair.
We've got a question from Board Member Billiou and then over to Foundation. Yeah.
Sorry. I just have some questions about or that I reflected on from last week's meeting about ADP. Sorry if you can't hear me. So I'm just wondering if you can kind of conceptualize what the day-to-day would look like for the transition to ADP. So once that transition happens, what is the relationship between the school and ADP? Like, what is the day-to-day?
Mr. Young, I don't know if you're out there and may contribute. I mean, I'm not sure, right? I think that's part of what we're working out as we start to work through the implementation, and what that will look like in terms of what that day-to-day will be.
Okay. I mean, maybe I can be a little specific, I guess.
Sure.
So what, I guess, would the proximity be to resources? Like, will there be an in-house person from EDP at the district that, like, if anything is wrong, we can resource that person? Or would it be like you got to reach out to them and then it takes time, like wherever they are? Like, I guess, what is the proximity to resolving issues?
Yeah. Um, So, I mean, I think, part of what we're evaluating, one aspect of the answer, I don't know that it'll be a full answer, right? And we can follow up on some of this. And certainly, I can imagine as we start to get that relationship underway, given the highlight around all of this work, it'll be good to do a full kind of session around what this is going to look like. But one of the things we'll be evaluating is the roles of our existing staff.
Yep. Okay.
Right. And so, well, it's not yet determined exactly which roles and in what capacities, we will continue to need. We anticipate continuing to need PPS capacity, right, in the payroll department. And so one of their responsibilities, obviously, will be that direct kind of liaison relationship to be able to resolve issues.
Okay.
Or you can maybe if you want to ask your last question, then Terry, you can chime in with anything. Or I don't know if it's your last one.
I mean, the one point is that there'll be nobody from ADP on staff permanently.
Okay.
They'll just be involved as we transition to ADP. And then we have steps we need to take as we gather people's time, and then they process the payroll. And then if there's an issue, they support us in resolving the issue.
Okay, so they will be trained to run the systems internally, and then when there's an issue, they would have to rely on ADP to come and resolve it.
Correct. To be available to help resolve it.
Okay, all right. Thank you. That's the information I want to. And just one more question, not to you, but to them, about the restorative work. Can you just reiterate who is that being done with, and how long they'll be working together?
Yeah. So we just kicked off last week. And so there are teachers, most of our secondary assistant principals from the high schools and the middle schools. We have, I think, some counselors and social workers on the team. Make It Happen coordinator from here at Casco Bay is on the team. Myself, Dr. Reiger, who's our behavioral mental health director. And then it's being co-led by Jose Bu, who is part of the great GSP, Great Schools Partnership team, and his background and expertise is in restorative justice and restorative practices. And then we have community partners at the table as well. So Portland Empowered, Maine Inside Out, the behavioral health learning community. And I think there are some others, but I could follow up with all of the specifics if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's a very diverse group of people. We just today invited Carrie Dowdy, the president of the union, to join the team. And so we're trying to kind of have it be expansive and representative of all sorts of perspectives and stakeholders, and be, nimble enough to get the work done. And so I think that was the second part of your question. How long is it going to?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're meeting, we're trying to meet a couple times a month in these first in January and February to get the momentum going. Jose led a really powerful community building circle in our first session, which was a good way to kind of start to create trust within that group. And then we'll meet monthly through the rest of this academic year. And the plan is to do like a 2-day retreat this summer where we can go really deep and come out with concrete recommendations that might have resources attached to them. And that's where we'll be using some of that ESSERF money that we have reserved for this work to be able to have the resources available to enact some of the recommendations coming out of that work group. And after that, I think we'll have to reevaluate if the team should continue in that way. I think that will be a question they ask themselves once we get to that point.
Thank you. And this is only specifically for the suspension, or to like ratify the suspension numbers, or to strategize around how to figure out a way to like resolve that.
Yeah, I mean it's broadly about moving in the direction of more of a restorative approach. But yeah, the kind of leading charge of the group is how do we further reduce suspension and eliminate the disproportionality that we continue to see in the data.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
A good board member Bilio. Is that all of your questions?
Yeah, that was it.
Okay, beautiful. All right, go ahead.
Okay, so I was going to introduce you briefly. I'm pleased to introduce Andy Wiseman Summers, who I believe you all know is the Executive Director of the Foundation for Portland Public Schools. A part of the agreement we have between the foundation and the district is that the foundation provides a quarterly update on their activity, which Andy will do this evening. Before passing it off to Andy, I want to shout her and Janine Bischoff out for their incredible dedication to advancing the Portland Promise and to bringing our community together around shared goals and innovative work. So Andy.
Thank you very much. All right, like I typically do, I'm going to share a few slides. Oh, wait, I forgot to share screen. Okay. So I'll start. No, I need to not share with the sound, right? So just starting briefly with an update on some of our, one piece of our fall programming, because the last time I was here in October, our application period was open for our annual Equity and Innovation Teacher Grants. And I just wanted to report that since that time, we awarded 76 grants to teachers, social workers, ed techs, and librarians at 15 of the schools in the district for a total of $59,261. And the applicants are asked to share how many students will be impacted by their grant. And so that total number is over 10,000 student experiences. They're not necessarily unique students because some grants affect more than one student. So just a brief update on that. And one thing that's new, that's been in the works for many years, well before my time, is the thought that the foundation should play a role in gathering alumni, sharing information, sharing successes. And when part of our vision for how we help the district is around community engagement and community investment in the district. And a really untapped piece of that is working with the tens of thousands of graduates of the Portland Public Schools. And I would say the two biggest issues around that in the past have been capacity around in terms of staff, but also the fact that we didn't have the data around, where those alumni were or how to reach them. So we have been talking with a group called Alumni Nations that is a company that works only with public schools or public education foundations to do this kind of work. And we have the board of the foundation has agreed to contract with them to help us build a directory of alumni for the following reasons. So our goals are to strengthen the extended Portland Public Schools community. And ideally what we'll do is we'll gather contact information, year of graduation, and what high school alumni graduated from, to create a directory or networks that could be used for things like professional opportunities, social connections, job shadows, career advice, mentoring. This is a ways down the road, but it's the hope of what we'll do when we have this data, so that it would be useful to current students, recent graduates, or anyone at any point along the way could reach out and try to connect, much like many colleges and universities do. And we want to, our part as the foundation is we want to share with alumni what's happening in the Portland Public Schools, successes, stories, athletics, awards and recognitions, some of the great stuff that's happening to keep people feeling connected. And ultimately, probably years down the road, to give those folks a chance to give back in terms of their time or potentially to donate. And so the great thing is, some of you may remember that there was a company called Harris Directories that made hardbound directories of alumni. They stopped doing that in Portland for either at Deering and Portland High in 2007 in one of the schools and 2012 in the other. I don't remember offhand which is which. But we were finally able, with Alumni Nation's help, to reach out to those companies and get those records electronically. Wow. And they provided us with records back to the 1870s. So we got 70,000 records of graduates that we now have in CSV files. Now, of course, they're terribly corrupt, right? Like a lot of those people are deceased. Presumably, many of their contact information is no longer correct. So what we're paying Alumni Nations to do is to try to clean some of that up and create a directory over the next months that hopefully has more recent information about the living alumni of the Portland Public Schools. So this is, we imagine this being a years-long process, but we've just signed the contract with this company and we're going to start that process now. So that's a big piece of what we've been doing lately. Another quick update that the foundation is involved in is the Reimagining Family Engagement. So I briefly wanted to share that back in December, the school board chair, Lentz, and I co-facilitated a session on rethinking PTO fundraising for PTO leaders from across the district. One of the primary purposes was just sharing from one school to the other. What are you doing? Like, what is your school doing for fundraising? Is it successful? Is it not successful? What can we share? And we created a shared drive so that if a school wants to do a 5K or a school wants to do an auction, they don't have to start from scratch, that hopefully they can use the planning documents, invitations, sponsorship levels, like a range of things across the PTOs. So we've made that available to our contacts at every PTO in the district. And if any of you wanted access to that, we're happy to share it. The other interesting thing we started was a group discussion about community-centric fundraising and how fundraising across our schools can be more equitable. This is a complicated conversation, but as you can imagine, some of the communities at some of our schools, at the elementary level in particular, have much more capacity to fundraise than other elementary schools. I don't know that we have an answer, but we've started the conversation about how we could do that. Is there more of a role that the foundation could play in fundraising that was distributed across schools so that PTOs could instead use their energy to do things like community building or, educational events at their schools and not have to focus on fundraising when it's such an uneven playing field? Or could there be, we talked briefly about models where that if a school raised over a certain amount, that part of the rest of their proceeds would be sent into the foundation to be redistributed, by number of students at a school, or taking into account Title I. And I don't know if this is a direction we're going to go in, but the conversation's happening. And I would really welcome any of you all to meet with me one-on-one or to have another conversation about it, or anyone listening, watching on Facebook right now, because we're just gathering ideas. So that's another piece. And then finally, we do an annual appeal where we ask for donations to benefit students in the Portland Public Schools. We launched that on Giving Tuesday, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. And we did create another 1.5-minute video showing the impact of a donation. And I would love to share it with you now.
All right, so when you're ready. Okay, I'm really excited to launch a band. I really want to get better at this accent. I love performing. It's my favorite thing to do. Thank you very much for your donation of money and instruments to the students in Portland. Our summer work grant from the foundation allowed us to create a safer, more welcoming school.
Thank you for helping me have my social entrepreneur.
The work of the foundation has allowed Portland Public Schools to advance their STEM initiatives in ways we couldn't even imagine.
The makerspace has been a game changer for my students. We get to test and learn new stuff.
I can't wait to race my stepdaughter. It's going to be so fun.
I love our mobile computer lab. The students are able to do so much more with the new computers. Getting the chance to take this class and code has completely changed my life, man.
Thank you so much for advancing the equity work in Portland schools and for all of your support.
The foundation's support is making it possible for us to recruit and retain many more teachers in Florida programs. Thank you for providing culturally appropriate food for our food pantry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
It works a little better when you don't have the delay from playing it on Zoom. But I do want to shout out one of the members of our board, Morgan Meyer, who's one of the founders of P3 Video in Maine. He's a professional videographer, and he made this video as a donation to us. So I think I'm full of technical difficulties today. Hang on. That larger again. So just to share that as of when I created this slideshow, we've received 106 unique donations totaling $30,533. 63 other donations, not to the annual appeal, but Kate, that arrived since we launched the appeal. So we assume that that means that people heard our appeal and then decided to donate to a different fund within the foundation. So another $20,000 in that area. 22 of those were unrestricted and 41 were directed to one of our other funds or programs. And we've had quite a few others come in over the last week. So thank you to our community who's listening for the support. And as we always do, we share some of our major donations. So these are the business donations since the last time I presented in October. I'm not going to read them all, but they're there if you have any questions. And then the next slide are foundation grants from mid-October through now to the foundation. And I will point out that partway down that page is $23,750 from the Nellie Mae Education Foundation. That's for restorative practice work that really complements the work that Superintendent Nellie was just talking about. It's specifically for training for students at the 3 high schools to build their own toolkit of restorative practices and responses to conflict. And I believe that's it. So I'll stop my share. That wasn't working very well. Any questions?
Yes, Board Member Victor.
Thank you so much for this update. I had a question, a couple of questions about the Reimagining Family Engagement session.
Mm-hmm.
The most recent one. I'm wondering how, of the elementary school PTOs, which is I think where some of the fundraising can be quite competitive between the schools, and then there's a lot of there's quite a lot of, as you talked about, disparity in the capacity at different schools. I'm wondering what the representation was like, if how many of the PTOs showed up, and in general, was there an openness to this work and to rethinking how PTOs do fundraising?
Yeah, I can't offhand remember exactly which schools were represented. I think they were in the range of 35 people who attended. But it was overwhelmingly positive about wanting to share and being transparent. And there was a really great, very candid conversation where I know that there were representatives from Lyseth there and Longfellow, who shared, both PTO members and school administrators, who shared that their PTOs raise about $30,000 or $35,000 a year from fundraising. The East End PTO is also represented, and they were like, "Wait, what? We raised like $5,000." And I think they just didn't necessarily know how large the disparity was. But people were really eager to share their resources on what they're doing, and then eager to have the conversation. There was no proposal about what to do next beyond sharing resources that was actually discussed, but there was no hesitancy. And I think it was pretty universally recognized, like, that the current system isn't great, but we're not quite sure on what to do next.
I wonder if there's, is part of the conversation, or was part of the conversation, a recognition that when PTO meetings are focused on fundraising, that it excludes so much of our community?
Yep. That was a big part of it. And School Remember Lens was led part of that conversation, which was great. I don't know if you want to chime in.
Yeah, I would just add that everybody in the room was like, I don't do the PTO to raise money. In fact, I hate raising money and wish that I could just work on developing relationships within my school community. So how can we work together to get to that point and have fundraising be kind of like a separate thing? But yeah, there was very much a recognition of asking for money excludes people right off the bat. And how can we broaden kind of what our definition of giving or contributing to our school community could look like.
Right. In terms of time and support of your children at home and support of teachers, that there were lots of ways to give that aren't financial. And also this recognition that some schools really depend on PTO contributions to run their annual programming and field trips, and which is another bigger question, but it's a reality. for some of the schools. So it's not as simple as, great, let's just stop fundraising.
Yeah, I know. Before I was on the board, I was a co-chair of the Reiki PTO, so I know all too well how essential that money is, even when it prevents, I think when it prohibits a broader community involvement. So just really appreciate the initial conversation and steps of sharing best practices of what's working for schools, so that schools can learn from each other and hopefully work together. I'm wondering what the next steps are.
Yeah, I've put out an offer to attend any individual school's PTO, and I'm attending the Reiki PTO tomorrow. So working through that to continue the conversations kind of in a school by school way is what we have on deck now. The Reimagining Family Engagement has 2 more sessions this year, and the next one is next week or the week after. It's soon. I'm sure you all have the date of it, and that's about reducing barriers to participation, how to make meetings friendly and accessible to folks with complicated schedules, needing interpreters. Will be co-run by Maureen Clancy and Pius Ali from Portland Empowered. So that's kind of relevant to this as well. And then there's one more session this year of convening the PTOs. And I think we're hoping to talk about restorative practices and help build that knowledge for parents. So there's a lot of competing things to talk about. And I'm open to ideas of other next steps, because as you've heard, like, this is one of many, many things we're doing. But it's an important one.
Thank you.
Board Member Bondo?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andy. Thank you for the great presentation. I have a couple of questions. So my first one is on the teachers' grants. And I don't know if you have those answers for me. So I wonder, when I look at the teachers and I look at everything about the learning strategies behind the background of those projects, I mean, I look at the way to advance more academic opportunity for students. Mm-hmm. So I wonder, because I love outcomes. I love results and the way to measure those outcomes. That's just the way we look at the improvement of the project and how those projects really impacting the learning strategy to our students. So I just wonder, when we grant it to the teachers, any those kind of projects, do we have any reported how much the projects was a success and how many and some outcomes or impacts to our students?
That's a great question. We try to keep the process of applying and reporting as streamlined as possible to not make it feel like a lot of extra work for staff. But the application asks, of course, what do you want to use the money for? It also asks how it's aligned to the Portland Promise and or the district priorities. And there's, a space, and that's one of the criteria and the rubric that we use to decide. And how many students it will impact. In the final reports, we ask a pretty open-ended question. We ask, were you able to use the funds? How many students were impacted? And then how do you, please describe the successes or challenges, what happened in your grant. Completing that is a requirement to applying for a grant again in the future, but it's pretty open. Like, we don't go down a really, really challenging road of asking people to share assessment data or anything like that. It's just, how do you, what happened? Tell us how it had an impact. And we have all of that from every year. And if, it's shareable if you're ever interested in seeing it. But
yes, I am. Yeah. I am interested. And thank you. And then when I look at the pool of the grantees, can you be able to say on the different level, elementary school, middle school, and high school, which one has the most applicants? I mean, so we can see exactly what the needs are the mostly. And yes.
Yep. The list of grantees is available on our website right now on it always is on the teacher grant page. We split the review nights into an elementary night and a secondary night. And we include middle school with secondary. We some years include middle school with elementary, depending, on the numbers. But I believe this year we had between 45 and 50-ish pre-K through 5 applications, and about the same number. And board member Bill, you may remember, she was one of the reviewers this year. I mean, I haven't looked at it in 2 months, but it was between 45 and 50. It was quite evenly split. We only had 1 application from Portland Adult Ed, and we granted it. But that we often have more, but we did fund pre-K through adult.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So mostly on your report, you used to make a report for the community funds. And I remember I've been asking a lot of questions.
Yes.
4 years ago. So I didn't hear anything about the community fund. So I just wonder, because I know that we have a lot of families homeless right now because of the rental assistance just, ended last November. So I wonder if the foundation was able to support some of those families through a multi-level.
I didn't specifically report on families in crisis because I was worried about how long my presentation would be. And I know that the meetings can be quite long. But we have had an increase again this year. At our mid-year financials, we're on the same fiscal calendar as the district. So in December, halfway through the year, we had dispersed over $46,000 for families in crisis. So that would put us on track for over 90,000, which would be the highest since fiscal year 21. Is that right? The first full year of the pandemic. And we have not run out of funds yet, but we don't typically bring in $90,000. We won't be able to year after year sustain that unless we really change our fundraising for that fund, which we haven't yet. So it's been a lot.
Right. I imagine. Thank you for doing it. And my last question for you, Andy, is that if I don't remember, I think during the payroll crisis, I think I read on your website, and we have some fund to support some of the staff who had some issues during the payroll crisis. Can you just talk about how many staff we were able to support, and if everything went well?
Yeah, we our board discussed this and decided that we wanted to keep the Families in Crisis Fund for families that have a household member who is a student, pre-K through Portland Adult Ed. And so staff who have a student, an elementary, middle, high school, Portland Adult Ed member are eligible for that fund if they're unable to pay their bills. And that was the case for a few folks who didn't get paid properly through payroll. Had a couple other staff members with serious health issues in their families that have also been eligible. But the numbers that I'm aware of have been small. I think it's around 6 this year, staff members who qualified. And that's been true in past years as well, that we've had small numbers of staff who have applied. And we don't ask if the recipient is a staff member. I just sometimes happen to know that they are. And we don't share those names, of course. But we have had staff members eligible.
Right. Perfect. Thank you so much for what the foundation does.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Board Member Bondo. Board Member Grant.
Thanks for the presentation.
Yeah.
Going back to the issue of PTO fundraising, like Member Figdor, I have been involved with PTOs in the past. I've been the past president of the Ocean Ave PTO, so I'm pretty acutely aware of the disparities across the district. But maybe consider this a request. I think it'd be useful to know what is the global amount of PTO fundraising across the city. Just take whatever rolling average, or last couple of years, or last couple of years before the pandemic, and just see what are we talking about here. Is it $200,000, $500,000? I can probably make an educated guess, but I think it'd be good to know, because if we change, I'd like to know what we potentially are losing, and if that's money that can be made up in other ways or other creative ways with public dollars. I'm not really sure, but I think it'd be good to know the total volume. Mm-hmm. Similarly, could you also take an inventory of what that's used for? I'm sure the principals could rattle off very quickly. Yeah. Here's what I use it for. So what are the gaps that we would be creating, that we would want to fill? Because I know, at least in my personal experience, it was used for quick things. If there was an event coming up and they needed T-shirts or something, they'd just say, "Hey, can the PTO fund some of this?" I wouldn't want to lose the flexibility and speed with which some of those small dollars were used. So I think it'd be useful, probably for all of us as an exercise, if we're going to make any changes, to understand what exactly is all this being used for. So if it's possible, you might be the best hub for collecting that.
Probably would.
So
I have that information anecdotally from a handful of the PTOs for
sure. I think we all probably do,
categorically.
right. So that's what I'm suggesting.
Yeah,
is make a full inventory across the PTOs, just so if we're going to make any decisions to change anything, that we know the full scope of it.
Yep, that's a great idea.
I know I'm not here to give you homework, but
that is a really
it would
good
be
idea.
really helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, Board Member Vilio.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Andy. Thanks for being here. Sorry, I'm trying to collect my questions. Can you tell me more information about the firm that is going to do that kind of collecting of all those people's information? How would they be like gathering that information?
Yeah, it's a good question. So Alumni Nations, I'm going to admit that I was very skeptical of using them at first myself. And they had given us referrals, and I was like, well, I don't want to talk to their referrals. I want to find my own referrals, like people who have used them that they didn't recommend. And so I reached out to the National Association of Education Foundations board and asked if anyone could recommend someone they knew personally who had worked with them. And I had 4 different conversations with either public school representatives or education foundation representatives around the country about their work, and they raved about them. And I was like, oh, like that was kind of surprising to me. So they have a data, they call it like upend and scrubbing system, where we will share the data that we have that was in those published books with them, as well as Derek Pierce has shared. Casco Bay has an alumni data list that's names, addresses, and email addresses. And we're going to get the home address at time of graduation of everyone in Infinite Campus from 2006 until now. And we're going to share that. And we have a contract with them that lays out the privacy, data laws in that. And Superintendent Botana, before he left, signed off on sharing that data and reviewed that contract. But I don't know technically what they do to try to figure out who's died or track, someone's address at 15 years ago, like how many times they've moved to their current address. We'll see.
Okay. I guess I just can't conceptualize how that would happen without like invading somebody's privacy.
Right.
But that's maybe just how I'm seeing it.
Right.
I'm wondering, and maybe like, is this something that like somebody can just be hired to do? I guess that's where I'm going with my question. Instead of like contracting with the company, could somebody be hired to do that?
It's my understanding that you need some kind of software like that. It's far too many individual. I mean, even right now, like we have from those books that are, readily available and sitting on the all of like those, it's, tens and tens of thousands of pieces of data that may or may not be correct, that those folks have already shared with those companies. And what we'll do is we'll send folks, and our hope is that we'll send an email twice a year, maybe to start with, like, memories of Portland High over the years, and like, remember in 1972 when they won the state championship and whatever, and we'll try to like, and then here's what's happening now. And there'll be an opt-out. And if someone unsubscribes, then they won't ever hear from us again. So that's the plan of how.
So it's only going to be like interpersonal. It's not going to be like a social media page where you're like.
We might on our social media say like, we encourage you to come to the webpage. But that would be, we wouldn't share anyone's information there. Okay. So that's the plan.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for taking me through that.
No, that's okay. I mean, I'm learning it myself.
Yeah.
But
I just had like 2 more questions, I think. I'm kind of like a bit blurry of the relationship between Portland Public Schools and Portland Empowered. Would you be able to just clarify that for me?
Yeah. So we're the fiscal sponsor of Portland Empowered.
Mhm.
So we have a legal agreement that was drawn up with an attorney that we hired as the foundation and Drummond Woodson representing the district, that lays out the responsibilities that, the kind of roles and responsibilities of the district, the foundation, and Portland Empowered. It's on our website. It's publicly available. I'm happy to email it to you if you want to see it.
I was sorry, maybe I should have been more specific. I guess, what is the relationship of Portland Empowered and the students? Like, so how do they serve Portland Public School students, if that makes sense? Or is that not a part of the?
No, so Portland Empowered is, under the umbrella of the foundation. That we consider them a program of the foundation. So they run a group called the Youth Engagement Partners. They call them YEPs. And they're students from each of the 3 high schools. They meet depending on the time of year, weekly to like twice a month. Liz Redwood is the person that coordinates that, the staff member. And so it is a program, it's kind of a leadership training program with the idea of students being an active voice and improving and advocating and changing and bettering the Portland Public Schools. So their leadership is all with like the focus of, being leaders in making their own schools in their district better. They also run the summer program, Reimagining Education, which is where youth work with adult allies around racial justice in the Portland Public Schools as issues. So those are their 2 key youth programs.
Okay. And I would just add that the Reimagine Education group seated the now student advisory team that is ongoing. So that's sort of started by them, and Liz is a part of that group of student advisors that we meet with regularly.
Yeah. And they have a corresponding group that's PEPs, the Parent Engagement Partners, that are current parents of, students in the district that do the same thing, that kind of learn like advocacy, leadership, school improvement strategies to be, community organizers around bettering the Portland Public Schools.
Okay. And do they do their own outreach, or do they just go through the Portland Public School system to find those folks?
I'm not as sure for parents, but for students, they go and do presentations and in the fall, at least, maybe more than once a year at each of the 3 high schools. So they share information to like be read to students, but they actually come to the schools, like to assemblies or to, whatever the school sets up, and talk about what they do and offer it for interested participants.
That's awesome. Just one more question. Let me go back to, I think some of the funding specified like how much money is rewarded to like what programming. I'm wondering if there's like opportunity for internal programming, like, for example, Make It Happen to apply for these grants.
Yeah. So, one of the things we do is we apply for grants on behalf of the district. So I actually have 2 applications pending for Make It Happen that I worked on with Grace Valenzuela, Tim Cronin, and Nyla Wisa to create because, I'm hopeful that people in the district know when there's a need for something outside of the budget. If they're looking for private funding for it, we don't seek federal or state grants, but any kind of foundation grant or donation really should come through the foundation. So people, Grace is very good at this, saying like, I have this need, look for funding. So I know what Make It Happen is. And when I see an opportunity that might be well aligned to that. So we have an application pending with the Sam L. Cohen Foundation for funding for the middle school expansion to Make It Happen, and with the Panera Foundation nationally. We should know about both of them soon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, that was it.
Perfect. Thank you. I don't see any other questions. And just full disclosure, I am on the development committee with the Foundation for Portland Public Schools. And so I get to work very closely with Andy, and her whole team is just so dedicated and really provides so much glue within our schools and necessary funding for crucial programs. So just thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Great. Thank you so much, Andy. Appreciate all the support and work and partnership with us here in Portland Public Schools. And just to clarify, the next Reimagining Family Engagement is next Thursday, the 26th at 5:30. For the last part of our superintendent's update tonight, I would like to welcome Executive Director of Operations, Terry Young, and our Transportation Leadership Advisor, Kevin Whittemore, to share an update around transportation. The intent of this presentation is to share and make transparent with the board and our community some of the challenges that we've had. As you know, fortunately, not as much since we've returned to school in January, but previously in December. And a little bit earlier into the fall, we were challenged by having to cancel bus routes on occasion. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the challenges underlying that, the strategies that we've enacted to be able to address that, and strategies we've considered and don't see as viable kind of for the current year. So to just make it visible to everybody what those challenges are and what we're doing to try and address those. So Terry, I'll turn it over to you and I'll start the slides.
Thank you. Tonight, I'd like to start with some shout outs to the transportation department. Incredibly dedicated, hardworking people who make sure our students safely arrive at school each day and return home. So they've had a lot thrown at them the last few years with COVID. And so I just wanted to start with a thank you to all of them. Okay, the purpose for tonight is to kind of give the board an understanding of where we currently are with transportation. Some of the things we're challenged by, some of the things we're trying to work through, and things to think about moving forward. Currently, with staffing, we have 3 open driver positions and 1 open trainee position. And so as Superintendent Townsend mentioned, there's been times where we've had to cancel bus routes because of staffing. And so far this year, school year, we've canceled buses on 12 school days. And most of the time it's been 1 bus. There were two occasions when we had to cancel 2 buses. And the process for that is that 5 o'clock in the morning, the department determines that they don't have enough drivers to run all the routes. Before they do that, they go through a process of where basically it's all hands on deck. Anybody who can drive, the director has a license, the director will drive. So they try to make sure they can cover every route. And then when they get to the point that they've realized they just can't, they notify me. And then I send out a school messenger that goes out to families specifically on that bus. So it doesn't go out globally to every family in the school. It just goes out to bus 99, those students. And so it goes in the form of a text message, a email, and a recording, which are translated and indicating that the bus is canceled for that day. We also rotate the schedule. So if the bus driver of bus 99 is out sick for 4 days, we don't cancel bus 99 each day. We rotate it through so different buses are impacted. And so all of those announcements go out before 6 a.m. so families have plenty of time to respond. Other areas that have been impacted with driver shortages can be after school activities that need to be rescheduled or canceled. And then we also struggle sometimes with timely transportation for students who might be identified to attend an out-of-district placement or even a different placement within the district, but they're across town. So in students that arrive in our schools that are homeless, arranging transportation for them. So those are some of the other areas that we can struggle with when due to our staffing. So contributing factors. What contributes to the staffing challenge? Well, one, there's a national shortage. So it's not just a Portland issue. It's not a Maine issue. It's an across the country issue. Another is our bell schedule, the way it's structured, doesn't allow for the most efficient use of resources. So we have a 3-tiered system right now. And if we could go to 2, then that would allow drivers to double up and do more than one run. And then the other thing has been, there's an increase in the number of students that require transportation within and outside of our district. So that number of students who need specialized transportation has increased. So action steps, what have we done? So a lot of this started last year or maybe even the year before, but we implemented hiring bonuses for new drivers. We partnered with adult ed to train new hires. So if you want to become a bus driver and you don't have your license, we'll work with you to get to that point where you get your license. Whereas previously, you had to have your license to be even considered for a position. So we worked on that. We have created a driver trainer position, so someone who trains people. And we have 3 trainee positions so that people can work for us while they're gaining their credential to drive. Another thing that we did, which is we just started this, but we've recruited Portland Public Schools staff who work in other departments to help with transportation. So maybe somebody works in food service and they're willing to transport a student for us home each day, then we've been able to do that as well. And I think we have 3 or 4 drivers who are doing that. And so other strategies, consolidated bus routes. We were able to consolidate one route so that, again, fewer drivers needed to drive because there's one fewer route. And then we've contracted with outside vendors for 6 of 29 routes. So I talked about the changes to the bell schedule that will allow for double runs and more efficient use of resources. Meaning, as I explained, we have 3 different tiered bell schedules, and we could go to 2 tiers. Along with a change to a bell schedule, another strategy for consideration is to expand Metro so that middle school students would ride the Metro. So with those 2 changes together, we would eliminate many of our challenges because we wouldn't need as many drivers. And then the other is to increase outsourcing of buses and drivers. The real negative of that is it's expensive, and it also is unreliable in that they're trying to hire people as well. So there's no guarantee that they're going to be able to consistently meet that need. So I think that, from the transportation department standpoint, we don't really see any of these changes as viable for this year. We can't change the school times now. So what our plan is to keep doing what we're doing, keep trying to recruit drivers. But as far as moving forward, there's definitely some things that we could have more conversation on and consider as far as how to address this issue.
Ready for questions?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Beautiful. Board Member Opperman.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One of which was a thought when you were talking about the expansion of Metro to include transportation of middle students, which would be in the future. Immediately, would it be possible to have a route or a group of parents that might be able to transport their students on public transportation if they were given a pass? That much like you would be doing it, so that when you're having these bus routes out, how do the kids get there anyway? So if there was some way to standardize that, that was my one comment to think about.
Yeah.
Related to that is actually Portland adult ed students do not get passes like the high school students do. And I just was wondering if that could be considered, because I think, again, that might facilitate some transportation going on there. the other question has to do with safety on the buses. I've been doing some talking to some people and stuff. And so I was wondering if you would address concerns about safety on the buses and around the buses. For example, students' actions on buses and what the ladder of restorative justice has going on with that and how effective is it? And also about parents blocking buses in, and parking and where students would be walking near buses at the different schools. Mm-hmm. I'd heard that was going on as well. So I don't know if there are any other safety issues that are up that you know of.
Not that have been brought to my attention. I don't know if Kevin wants to speak to it. I mean, from a former principal standpoint, I mean, I always found that the transportation office was very good about communicating with students that may be not following the rules on the bus. And then I would follow up with the student.
Okay.
And for the most part, I thought it went pretty well. And if it continued, they would let me know. And then I would take it a step further involving parents. And
so it's really the principal making some action to deal with it.
I would say in my experience.
Yeah, so historically, all safety discipline issues in the transportation department have been managed through the school. The reason being the school is where the relationship happens. It's really difficult for a driver that has 70 kids on his bus and 3 minutes to get them off the bus to go start his next run to really effectively deal with those kinds of safety and discipline issues. 10 years ago, something like that, we added cameras to the buses, which have obviously been a great help for that, because at least now we can give the schools some really definitive information. But as far as the on-vehicle discipline safety, a lot of that really is handled through the schools. As far as, and I know exactly the situation we're talking about the bus being actually passed. We actually had a parent drive around a bus on the sidewalk between the bus and the school. I don't even know where to start with that one. And those kinds of things. And really, again, a lot of that falls back in the principal that was involved in that particular situation has been out there trying to get the information out. One of the things that happened is most of our buildings were built long before the types of bus circles that would be best for today and the size of our fleet today were around. And so in a lot of areas, I mean, Przemska, Longfellow doesn't even have, really a bus circle. Reiki, we kind of squeeze in on both sides. So there are safety issues that creep up. The schools have always been extremely helpful. And I've been in the department for 30 plus years and we've never had anybody hurt.
How cooperative are the police in situations when you're out on a road and the lights are flashing and this bus is passed? Has that worked? Are they missing it? They need some advice.
The busy streets right now, Target Street, we have 20, 30, 40 buses passed a day. It's just happens. And there's no, and when we've discussed this over the years with the police department, in those situations, they don't have the capacity to deal with it. And people will drive right by you. And unfortunately, we have had a couple of injuries over the years on those types of things. What we do to handle that today is on those busy streets, we don't have kids that should be crossing the street. Everybody should be loading door side and not crossing the street. So I have friends that drive in Bonnie Eagle where their kids literally cross massive highways. So we're well set for them.
Thank you very much.
All right, I'm going to go to Zoom. Board Member Bryden, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for the information in the presentation. I have a couple of follow-up questions. So I'm curious about whether the strategy to use Metro for middle school students, is there a possibility of using that this year versus waiting until next year?
I had made that suggestion to Superintendent Bottano back a few weeks ago when things were looking a little bleaker than they are today. The problem is that going to Metro without adjusting bell times does nothing. So it's a combination of things. And so what happens, and just to try to give a quick picture, is we've got 3 tiers that are 40 minutes each, right? Our bell times are 40 minutes apart, which gives us 30 minutes to do a bus run. And we now at almost all of our schools have bus runs that cover the whole city. And if you drive it all in Portland, you know, it's impossible to drive the city in 30 minutes. And so we end up having to put a lot more buses at each school because of the short window that we have to get all of the students. And the school board had asked me to do a deep analysis of the entire bell time situation to try to move bell times to where our earliest bell time was 8 o'clock and where middle school and high school students didn't start till 8:30. In the process of doing that, I found just huge deficiencies in the way that our bell times are laid out. And so, and that's a whole different presentation and it's pages long. But if we do both, if you go to 3 1-hour tiers and don't have Metro, you can do a lot of great things. But you end up with bell times at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and 10 o'clock, which I don't think you're ever going to sell.
Or 7:30, 8:30, 9:30.
Well, if we elementary, we can do it 8. So we do elementary at 8, elementary 2 at 9, middle school, high school at 10, which is I've been down this bell time road more times than I can count. So I just don't see that ever being sold. So Javier's suggestion was, well, what if we back up from that and we go to 2 bell times? Well, if you go to 2 bell times, then you got 8 and 9. Now you start to get really, really creative, and you begin to free up resources for athletic trips after school because the buses are off doing a 3rd tier. There's pages worth of benefits to that, but the only way you can pull that off is either to go hire 7 or 8 more drivers, which is an impossibility. Contract 7 or 8 runs, which is $1 million, or do middle school on Metro. And so just for a kind of a good picture, right now we are transporting 8 kids to 1 school for $900 a day, contracted. We can transport the entire middle school on Metro for $900 a day. But I was the director when we started doing the high school, so I've been down that road. It will be a much tougher sell. It's probably one of the proudest things of my career, but it will be a much tougher sell for middle school.
I don't disagree, and I appreciate all of your context and knowledge and expertise. Part of why I was asking that last question was I was curious about, and I don't mean to imply that you haven't already thought about this, but I was curious about whether it's possible to identify, for example, a middle school route that is logistically easier than others for folks to use the metro, in terms of if there's a need to cancel a bus route on a day, to do that one and sort of, use that sort of analysis. But it sounds like probably not because of the bell time issue and arrival on metro.
Right. If what we were canceling was just a middle school run, that'd be great. But with that middle school run is 2 elementary school runs.
Okay.
Actually, the way Metro lays out, King and Moore are going to be really easy Metro runs. Lincoln's going to have some challenges. Well,
And just to clarify, part of our protocol that Terry was speaking about is informing Metro students and families can take Metro on any day that, a bus is canceled. Metro is aware. Students and families are able to access Metro to get to school on those days that their bus routes are canceled, and they subsequently invoice us. So we have an existing agreement in the context of these cancellations, right, for students and families, elementary or middle school families, to be able to access Metro. So that is one of the alternative strategies around the bus cancellation issue that we've had enacted since last fall, or since last year, when this first issue really became kind of critical for us. But, I think there's a lot more discussion about potential scenarios that, we've been in conversation about wanting to have. I think we wanted to just kind of clarify where we stood for this year and the, the strategies that we're trying to leverage to be able to address the transportation challenges in the current year.
That makes sense. My last question is whether we have any data on the 12 days where there had to be at least one bus canceled. I'm curious about whether we have any data on whether that had an impact on student attendance.
Yep. And so it was the height of this, unsurprisingly, was also this year during the moment, the majority of these, and correct me if I'm wrong, happened, between Thanksgiving and the winter break. So this happened during the time when we were experiencing the most significant uptick in flu cases. So it was a little hard to tease out exactly from an attendance perspective. I'll say last year when we were in the midst of this and we had a much more elaborate follow-up transportation plan. Many of us were driving the bus routes, trying to, just make sure nobody was left on the side of the road and out there. Fortunately, we rarely encountered people, so the communication was effective, and we did not see significant impacts on attendance. Students, we've done the communication, people have alternative plans. The importance of the early notification has been clear, right? So they can activate those. But historically, we have not seen meaningful impacts. We saw really consistent attendance despite the bus cancellations.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful. We're going to go to Board Member Russell-Better, then Bondo, and then Figdor.
Thank you, Chair. And just wanted to say thank you, Terry, for the presentation, and helpful just to know what steps have been taken and kind of, just what things are on coming up the pike for us to work towards. I just wanted to say my experience of when my daughter's bus route was canceled. I was trying to remember when it was, but basically the steps that you laid out, Terry, that I felt like they were really good communication. So the text and the call and the email. And I think I just appreciate the, trying to, swap out the routes being affected, knowing that, different communities too, where it's harder for families to get their kids to school and to kind of, move that through. I think that's been a good model. So Ms. Bryden had asked one question that I had, but the other question I had, Terry, was about the unhoused students. And so I was just wondering, and I was picturing elementary, but I'm assuming that that's maybe everywhere, but would unhoused students that are middle or high be taking Metro? I don't know. But my question was just when you've had the issue of bus, not be able to run a bus for the unhoused students, how is that getting resolved? Because I assume that's sort of a different process than the other.
I mean, one piece, and then you guys can weigh in. We did, of the bus routes that we may cancel, we have kind of separated and don't consider for cancellation. Routes that are servicing students who are going to out of district placements or special ed routes, and some of our routes to support students who currently don't have housing are McKinney-Vento students. High school McKinney-Vento students are expected to take the bus as all others there access to take the bus. But we have a few, kind of central locations that we do have some transportation routes, but we try and avoid cancellation of many of those because they're, trying to protect our most vulnerable students to get to school, both students, who have IEPs or intense IEPs and require specialized transportation, or students who qualify for transportation through our McKinney-Vento program.
Okay. So have those not had to be canceled as far as
No, they haven't.
you're aware?
Yeah. We have a spreadsheet and kind of there in a place where, okay, worst case scenario, we may have to cancel those, but we haven't had to do
something else around over for them. Okay. Okay. I was just wondering, I assumed it was sort of in a different category, but wondered what would happen. Okay. I think that was my only question.
The only back and forth discussion with the principals is one principal liked when we notified the whole school because he felt like that helped other families scoop up kids who might not have access to a bus. But, we ended up notifying just the students on the bus in the morning, just because, it can be alarming to get a notification at 5:30 that doesn't pertain to your child. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that part, that might be too much. I just thought of one other thing, Terry, which was that I do remember communication when Superintendent Townsend mentioned this. I remember the communication about the middle school students being able to use Metro, but I kind of forgotten about that. I don't know if we would have the data about how that's been used, but I just wonder how that's being communicated or shared. Or I just wonder if maybe families, because I'd forgotten.
I can connect. I'm happy to connect with the principals. And I send out an email reminder on Sunday night saying okay, these are the next buses that could possibly get canceled to the principals. I can certainly remind them, the middle school principals, that students can access Metro if they need to.
I think that would be helpful just because I think about high school students that are using the bus. So it's sort of maybe on their minds. And I just think of like middle schoolers that I know that just haven't really started practicing using Metro. So I just think maybe, I don't know, even encouraging students to try it out together or something too might just be, I just think some kids probably until maybe 8th grade don't necessarily have a lot of practice with it. So maybe even just a reminder would be helpful, because I had forgotten, or just to let kids know in my community too that they can use that. So, okay, great. Thank you so much.
Right. Board Member Bondo.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you. And one of my subgroup question was already answered. This was the question. Then board will serve better just ask for it. Just have a clarification, Terry. Thank you so much for the presentation. That's a huge challenges here. So I try to understand on the number 5 on that presentation, I think the transport student impacted by homelessness to school out of the district. So I try to understand if it's not the specialized programming. So are we transporting students who are homeless out of the district, out of Portland, and we are using our buses to move them to other district schools? I just try to put the dots together.
So we transport a fair number of kids to South Portland and to Westbrook. Other than those 2 towns, and that was what Terry had referred to earlier, we have implemented a program this year to use staff members that are willing to pick up a kid in Gorham and bring them to Portland or vice versa. And so we are doing this year, we have no buses transporting McKinney-Vento students to any places other than Westbrook and South Portland. All of that's being done with with other staff members.
Oh, okay. So we don't do it. So that means only volunteer cars and staff are doing it?
They are compensated for doing that.
Yes, they are compensated. About any insurance purpose. I mean, car insurance, if anything happen, are we cover the insurance of the car, or that's from the everything is about the responsibilities of the owner of the car?
Well, and then this is something we've discussed over the years, and insurance obviously has always been a big piece. We used to do a lot of that in taxis, and finally the decision was made that yes, there is some liability there, but the liability is probably less than it is in taxis. And at least by using our own staff, we have people that we know have student skills. We know, they've had their fingerprinting, they've got all that background information. Several years ago, we just completely quit using taxis for that. And but then, you can't, when you're already short drivers, you can't take a bus that'll carry 70 kids and go get 2. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Board Member Bondo. Board Member Victor.
Thank you. I wanted to start with also shouting out Kevin and the entire department for just incredible work through COVID and constant troubleshooting. I know it's been an immense challenge, so thank you. I wanted to, I think the board had made a commitment when we moved back middle school and high school start times to 8:20 in 2021 to come back the following year and I know, Kevin, this is the work that you've been engaged in for so long to figure out if we could further move back middle school and high school start times to align more with the science of adolescent development, which shows that kids essentially need to sleep in more. But also we made a commitment to, as you mentioned, to try to move elementary school start times to 8, no earlier than 8. And I just want to recognize that was work that Superintendent Batana had committed to the board to do prior to the leader in his final year, and that's something that's we're not able to do due to the leadership transition. I think we should be clear with families and the community about that, given that I know for the elementary schools that have the early start time, it's a challenge for many. And we did commit last year in 2022 to try to move that early start time later to 8 a.m. So I just think that is important to recognize that we're not doing work that we had committed to do. And I don't know that we can answer this question now, but I'm wondering, what do we anticipate in terms of when we're able to look in depth at the great work that you've done, Kevin, to put together a 2-tiered start time schedule?
Well, the background work's done. It's the background work's done. I can sit down and show you what the alternatives are, but the hard part is not the background work. The hard part is, the transportation department can pull it off. The transportation department would probably love to pull it off because it has it has not only benefits for the students, it has some extreme operational benefits. But it's going to be a real political battle.
Right. And I think, just to acknowledge, the many things underway, right? So I appreciate the acknowledgement there with the transitions, with the superintendent search going on. So the many demands around community engagement and the substantive community engagement that would need to be true, both internally and externally. Because I think while there are some solutions that really solve some of the transportation challenges, they also create a number of other significant school management challenges that would require significant capacity to think through and figure out and plan for to reasonably be able to execute. So I think we would be concerned around the timeline in terms of where we stand, to be able to lift that, for the coming year amidst, these varying transitions. We're happy to bring light to some of that and what those are so that, can be prepared under the leadership, as the new superintendent's appointed to be able to, finally advance this and get to some resolution, because it's an ongoing, as we've seen now for a number of years, chronic issue. I mean, it predates my tenure in the district of various moves to be able to increase bus driver pay, things like that. I mean, it's a national issue we've been managing for some time. And there are no easy, obvious solutions that don't require significant shifts in one direction or the other. And so the breadth of kind of that engagement, it's not both at the community level as well as at the staff planning level to be able to accommodate something such as just 2 bus routes, would require significant amounts of staff supervision before and after school that currently we don't have resources for, right, and aren't prepared, right, within the school context to be able to accommodate. So it's a thorny issue in lots of directions and requires obviously significant community engagement and communication.
Absolutely. I fully recognize that. I just wanted to, I think, we owe it to be clear about what we're able to do and what we're not, even if we had made prior commitments.
And we'll be coming forward soon. We've begun the work with our other collaborating districts on our annual school calendar. So I think that may be a logical entry point to be able to kind of message the calendar and start and end times and our stance around that work here in the coming few weeks. So we've begun that work internally and with the collaborating districts that we have to work with in the context of paths.
And then just to reiterate the one aspect, and I know this presentation wasn't geared towards talking about adolescent aligning start times with adolescent sleep. It was around our transportation challenges, but just to recognize that is another huge driver of this work. I think we made a lot of progress. I know the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends it, that middle and high schools don't start prior to 8:30 and we're at 8:20. So we're close. But if there's a possibility to further push those start times, I think that would, the research suggests that it would benefit our students and that it has equity benefits as well. So just wanted to reground our work when we get there in that important science.
Board Member Grant?
Feel free to punt this one to next time if you want to think about it, but would it be possible to make the change for next year if we really wanted to push to do it for the start of the next school year to go to the two bell system?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I'll take the opportunity to punt. I think that requires, we're concerned about just the bandwidth. Our core priorities, right, for this spring, right, obviously have shifted, from where they began at the beginning of the year in terms of expectations around what we were able to accomplish. And so, our focus and, there's only so much bandwidth, right? I think we would be significantly concerned about trying to advance this while also trying to ensure we land, the payroll work and the transition to ADP amidst, advancing our budget.
Let me ask it this way so maybe next time or the meeting after that. When would be the last time that we could decide? Like, obviously if you get to August, it's too late, but we might still have time right now. What is that time frame for us? We wanted to push. When's the latest we could do that? That again, you don't have to answer that now, but that's how I want to think about it.
Can I address that from somebody that's been down that road once that doesn't want to go down it again?
Please do.
So the kind of underlying issues that Superintendent Townsend's talking about hit us right in the face when Manny and I did this 10 years ago, whatever that was. And we had a great bell time plan, but it was one of those things where I don't think that the parental community was really against this, but we hadn't sold it well and it wasn't developed well with the schools and it fell apart. And so some of the opportunities that are out there done well really do have a chance to benefit everybody. but we're going to go from, 15-minute pickup windows that we've got right now to 30-minute pickup windows. That means there's another 15 minutes on both sides of the day that there has to be staff members at the school to be able to receive the students, and planning through those things, having principals that really are on board and sold out to what you're doing. So I definitely would not personally recommend pushing forward with this unless everybody is on board, and not only the transportation issues are figured out, but the support issues under that are figured out.
If I may just finish, like if you tell us it's too late and it's not feasible, then just say so. I just want to know if it is on the table, when would that door close?
Yeah. I mean, my hunch, we'll follow up with clear communication about that, but I feel like we're at that point, to be able to communicate effectively, as we've reflected on communication being, a challenge, and some of what's led to some of our challenges, right? As we think back to the fall issues with the athletics, certainly in some elements with our payroll issues. And so I think the deliberateness, as Kevin's talking about, of being able to communicate effectively about it, to be able to land it, I think we would need to be done now, right, as we're advancing. So thinking about beginning that kind of campaign work, right? Again, it's, as Kevin said, it's not the back. He's done this analysis, right? That's, that's the part that can happen in a room with smart people, right? And that part's done, but it's the communication and the engagement and the planning, the engagement with collective bargaining partners, right? Because of the impacts that would have, are all substantive things that feel like amidst the other priorities are not where we would put time and bandwidth. It's important. We have a lot of important work to do. And so feel like this would make sense as kind of an issue to launch next summer, fall.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Beautiful. And I just had a couple of questions, and I just really appreciate everything that you're doing on a daily basis, because I just get the game of dominoes that you're playing all the time. And I'm so glad it's all in your head, Kevin. And I think in the listening sessions that we've been doing with schools and all kinds of staff, the biggest thing that we hear is just how understaffing impacts their daily job. And I think when I think about changing our transportation plan at all, I just think about all of these teachers and staff who have already been spread so thin for covering the people that we can't hire already. And that's by no fault of our own, right? That is a national problem. But to ask them to do this another heroic thing right now just doesn't make sense to me. And I think, Kevin, as you pointed out, it's not just the buses, right? It's the bus drivers, it's the before and after care, it's the principals onboarding, it's the community onboarding, and all of that on top of what's happening right now in our schools just feels too much. So that's kind of where I am landing on that. And I just had a couple of questions, because I do also hear from parents, what can we do to help with transportation? People are curious about, are there any walking school buses that still exist? Or is there anything that parents and guardians could do to take some pressure off the system on a daily basis? I'm curious if you would have anything to say to parents and guardians in that way.
Well, the walking school bus is great for a lot of reasons. That's not something that's ever been transportation driven. It's always been building driven. Even if it doesn't eliminate a bus route, if you have a 88 passenger bus with 88 kids on it, and now you only have 70 kids on it, yeah, it has benefits. Do I think there's a way to do that in such a way that it would be able to free up runs? I really don't. I mean, even things like Terry said, one of the things they did when things were just kind of falling apart was, and I made a lot of enemies, but I just took apart a run. I just said, sorry guys, this one's going away. But when you do that, it's not like a magic thing, right? Every one of those kids gets moved to somebody else. People get disrupted and stuff. So, and now, every now and then things pop up, and it's like Robin will say, well, Kevin, if we had this bus, we could do this. but we don't have that bus anymore. So there are definitely things you can do that help. It is going to take some serious restructuring to make a significant difference. And one of the other option, and I finished the budget today. Michelle, if you're listening, it's done. And I put, probably won't make any friends, but I put another $400,000 in a line that's already going to be $250,000 over this year to contract another 3 runs. Whether or not we can find somebody out there, but one first student had said that if we could give them 5 runs that they would. So my suggestion is going to be that we write an RFP and ask for people and see if we can't be, rather than calling Custom Coach and saying, please, can you give me one more run? Actually kind of being progressive and going out maybe. And obviously we go back to Greg and Jason and the local guys and give them a shot, but to kind of spread beyond that and see if we couldn't, but it'll be expensive. But it might be an expensive fix that's worth it for 1 year until we can. But we'll face that one in the budget. So
Beautiful. Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Oh, yeah. Board Member Youssef.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much. I just want to echo my colleagues and thank you for the hard work. Number 6, contracting with outside vendors. How is that going on? And
well, that's what we need to, that is one way to not eliminate the problem, but to reduce the problem. I believe if we could contract 5 runs, 3 new ones, and then take 2 of the ones that we're already contracting and kind of package them together and get some competitive bidding on it. Right now, I mean, if it wasn't for the 6 runs that we have contracted today, and unfortunately, I actually have the numbers here, but those 6 runs transport 15 students. So it's not like that's a huge number of kids, but when you've got 1 kid going to New Gloucester and 3 kids going to Acton, that just, it chews up huge resources. So if we weren't contracting those, we'd be canceling multiple runs every day.
thank you, Chair.
Beautiful. Any other questions, students? No? All right. Thank you so much for that presentation.
Thank you.
I'm going to do a 5-minute break, or did you have something you wanted to say, Emily? Okay, no, we're going to do a 5-minute break. So we'll come back at 8:08 and start with approval of minutes. Welcome back, everyone. We're now going to move into the report of the secretary, which is a consideration and action to approve 2 sets of meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes of December 20th, 2022? Board Member Youssef, is there a second? Yeah, Board Member Opperman. Beautiful. Any questions on the motion to approve these meeting minutes?
I'm not sure, but if there was a reference to Chair Figdor was on committee work, or which in that particular set of minutes. I don't have the minutes in front of me. I beg your pardon.
I saw that as well. I think it just needs to be switched to Chair Lentz.
Yeah,
there's just one reference.
That's just a smidge of the thing. That was the only thing I saw.
Beautiful. So we can take that as a friendly amendment and update that. Is there any other questions? All right. Being none, by roll call vote, please indicate whether you're in favor of approving the minutes of December 20th, 2022. Superintendent Townsend, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Bilyeu,
Yes.
Ms. Bondo,
Yes.
Ms. Bryden,
Yes.
Oh,
Sorry, could you hear me?
no,
Yes.
yes, very good. Ms. Figdor,
Yes.
Mr. Grant,
Yes.
Dr. Opperman,
Yes.
Ms. Russell Better,
Yes.
Mr. Youssef,
Yes.
Ms. Ellis,
Yes.
Mr. Haymond,
Yes.
and Chair Lentz.
yes. So the motion passes unanimously with the students voting with the majority. We're going to move on to our second set of minutes. So is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes of January 3rd, 2023? Board Member Opperman, thank you. Is there a second? Board Member Youssef, thank you. Any questions on this motion? Any discussion? Just double check Zoom. Okay. Seeing none by roll call vote, please indicate whether you're in favor of approving the meeting minutes of January 3rd, 2023. Superintendent Townsend, will you please call the roll?
Yep. Ms. Bilyeu,
Yes.
Ms. Bondo,
Yes.
Ms. Bryden,
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
with a yes there.
okay. Ms. Figdor,
Yes.
Mr. Grant,
Yes.
Dr. Opperman,
Yes.
Ms. Russell Better,
Yes.
Mr. Youssef,
Yes.
Ms. Ellis,
Yes.
Mr. Haymond,
Yes.
and Chair Lentz.
Yes. So the motion passes unanimously with the students voting with the majority. And now I'd like to move us on to the consent items, the acknowledgement of donations made to the school district. I'm not sure which of the superintendents will take that.
Tonight.
Okay, beautiful. Superintendent Townsend, would you like to speak to this item?
Yes. Under board policy KCD, the school board accepts by unanimous consent contributions made to the school district of durable goods of significant value and of symbolic importance as required by policy. All of the donations are listed in the board memo by name and donation accompanying this item. Our practice is that each donor receives a written contribution acknowledgement expressing our heartfelt gratitude and for their tax purposes. So with that, I would like to thank the many contributors to the Portland Public Schools that have made donations of durable goods, substantial value, and historical or commemorative significance. We're very grateful for their support of our work. So tonight, we'd like to recognize that the Portland Arts and Technology High School paths received the following donations: a 2006 Chevrolet Equinox from Andrew Haggerty of Falmouth, Maine; a 2000 Buick Park Avenue from Adam Rosenbaum of Falmouth, Maine; a 1933 Sea King 4-horsepower outboard motor; a 1951 Johnson 5-horsepower outboard motor for students to refurbish from Carol Gautreau of Scarborough, Maine; a 1983 Chris Craft Cuddy Cabin boat with easy load trailer from Mark Renna of Portland, Maine; a 143 horsepower Lugger Marine engine from Debrook Kinney of Queenstown, Maryland. Portland High School received Hannaford gift cards to purchase food for the food pantry from April and Dennis Noonan of Portland, Maine. Portland High School received an anonymous donation of Hannaford gift cards to also be used for the food pantry. And Ocean Avenue Elementary received a new microwave for the staff room from Dr. Will Burrow of Gray, Maine. Thank you.
So cool. Thank you very much. And I can't wait to see what happens with those that pass. And now we're going to move on to our board focus, which tonight will be an update on the status of the world language vision.
Great. And I will introduce the team that's stepping up to the mic. So I'm happy to welcome Carlos Gomez, the Director of Language Development, and Anne-Marie Orth, who's our world language teacher leader. They're going to provide us with an update on the world language vision. We've been trying to get this topic on our agenda for a while now. Many of you know that we recently held a community forum on our world language vision. During this time, we rolled out the vision to our community and took in feedback from parents and guardians about their hopes and goals for the ongoing evolution of our world language programming across the district. We facilitated these input conversations in language groups using the shared space cafe model we learned from Portland Empowered. We also had a special breakout for Lyseth parents who are interested in talking about the immersion program at Lyseth specifically. The forum was mostly attended by Lyseth families, but we did have other families join as well. Carlos and Anne-Marie will bring you up to speed on our current world language offerings and share the vision that was developed collaboratively by educators and community members. In addition, they'll preview the next steps that are underway to continue evolving our programming to come into greater alignment with our vision and to increase the percent of PPS students who graduate multilingual with the seal of biliteracy. So thank you both and take it away.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to share with you some of the great work that our community has engaged in. And most importantly, want to recognize the amazing work of our language teachers across all grade levels. Includes world language teachers at middle school and high school level, includes our immersion teachers at the elementary level, our world language teacher at Ocean Avenue International Baccalaureate Program, our English for speakers of other language teachers that are in all of our schools. These are amazing professionals that I'm honored to work with and work for, and really see them as exemplars of what amazing teaching can look like as students learn content and language simultaneously. That's really sort of the that's the magic formula as far as I can see. So I'm honored here to be with Anne-Marie Orth, who is also our world language specialist for the district. So she shares her expertise with our teachers and our schools in order to give our students a positive and enriching language experience. So I'm going to share our screen while Anne-Marie gives out a copy of our world language vision or language vision statement. And I'm having trouble finding my screen here, Henry. I don't know if...
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you very much.
You need us to share it, Carlos?
Maybe. I'm not seeing the option to share it.
Aaron could share it from his computer if that's helpful.
I'm getting these.
Oh. You got it.
You got it. Okay, great. Thank you. So our aims for tonight, to share with you an update on our program, our vision, give you a status of the of immersion for our district, and identify some key next steps for the remainder of this year and going on into next year. So a little bit of context first. Why have we developed a language vision? Essentially, on the next screen, we're going to give you some context. So before we answer why we have a language vision, just want to paint a picture of what our current world language offerings are. So we have programming at the elementary, middle, and high school level. You see it here in front of you. As I mentioned, only two elementary schools have world language programming at that level. Both Ocean Avenue and Lyseth. And for a while, we had what we called the Heritage Language Play Space at Reiki, which is on hold while they go through their construction. But it's a safe space for students to explore their heritage language as they transition to schools. At the middle school level, we have offered Spanish and French about every other day is our current language programming at the middle school level. We are offering Portuguese this year at King Middle School in response to the high number of Portuguese speakers to support them and in their development of literacy in their home language. And at the high school level, we have multiple entry points for students who come to us at all different levels, whether it's beginning level or advanced level of Spanish, French, as well as some other languages, including Arabic, Chinese. We are offering Portuguese this year as well. And students have access to programming outside Portland Public Schools, predominantly University of Southern Maine, and languages that we may not be able to offer, students have access to. The other piece of our context here on the next slide is, how many of our students are actively engaging and taking advantage of these world language opportunities. So as you can imagine, with only 2 out of our, 9 elementary schools, with only 2 of them having this program, not all of them are able to access it. We did have an elementary school world language program in 4th to 5th grade a few years back that is no longer part of our programming due to budget cuts. At the middle school level, a little bit more robust, where about 2/3 of our students are accessing world languages. About 2/3 of them are taking Spanish, about 1/3 taking French. At the high school level, roughly 50% of our students have enrolled in world language. It's not a graduation requirement, but it's certainly something that helps in a rigorous academic experience at the high school level. So we'd love to see an increase in that. All of this really leads up to the seal of biliteracy. So this is an opportunity that students can demonstrate literacy in English as well as 1 or more other languages. Approximately 50 of our high school seniors each year get the seal of biliteracy, which I think is most in the state. But we are always striving to do more with more languages, more students. Approximately 1/3 of the students who get the seal of biliteracy go through our world language programming, and about 2/3 come to us as multilingual learners speaking another language at home, having studied another language at another point in their education experience. A third piece of context that paints the picture for our language vision is taking a look at who our multilingual learners are. So currently, about 40% of our Portland Public School students speak a language other than English at home. And among our multilingual families, you'll see that Portuguese and Spanish are the fastest growing and also the top 2 languages spoken by our students at home. And you see the rest of the top 5. There are over 55 languages spoken in Portland Public Schools. So our language vision is predominantly connected with that context in mind. It's connected to our district goals. It's a few key sources that I want to highlight for you. One is our Portland Public School LAU plan, which is our blueprint to serve our multilingual learners to ensure that they have access to a rigorous academic content and that they develop English language. A key part of that LAU plan, which you as a board have heard before, and that we'll continue to share with you elements of that plan, is that multilingualism is an asset, right? So we know that students come to us and are building on their languages, on their multiple languages. The LAU plan highlights the seal of biliteracy as well, and the importance of literacy in our students' home language. We know that literacy in one language helps to promote literacy in English and a second, third, fourth, fifth language in many cases. Our language vision is tied to our equity goal, to our achievement goal, our whole student goal. This is at the core of everything that we do, and language is a key component of that. In fact, it's embedded in all of Tier 1 instruction. And as I mentioned earlier, the ideal teacher is somebody who can enhance language and convey content and help deepen critical thinking skills. And I think language teachers do all of that. On the next slide, another piece of the language vision is that it builds on our prior learning. So as I mentioned, we've had various experiences over the last 5, 10, 15 years that informed the vision. It is also based on best practices and research. We turn to the American Council of Teachers of Foreign Languages and the Center for Applied Linguistics, the Multi-State Association of Bilingual Educators, and other entities that have helped inform our thinking and with whom we learn alongside and deepen our practice. It also, the language vision incorporates and considers community and staff input. So there have been multiple vision statements developed over the last couple of years that continue to evolve around literacy, numeracy, around content area, around math instruction, et cetera. So those are all pieces that have gone into this language vision. So what is our vision and how was it developed? So first, a little bit of the process. We have had a world language vertical team that is composed of educators, both K-12, as well as adult level, as well as collegiate and graduate level participants on it. We've had current students, former students. We've had community members, we've had parents all contribute to that vision. Most of this work was done last school year. So we had 4 meetings over the course of the year. We reconvened in the fall to put some final touches on the version of the language vision that you have in front of you, or if is linked to this slide deck. And we also had the academic team help us fine-tune the vision statement. We shared this with the World Language Community Forum that we had back in December, as Superintendent Nally had mentioned, and really engaged in a very robust, great dialogue around language. And just to give you some of the highlights, there were over 40 people who attended, 10 facilitators or so. Some of the main themes that emerged, that immersion in learning languages is of high value to our community, that languages help us connect to other cultures and communities, that there are ways to improve our programming and communication about our language options. And there's a real interest in exploring additional resources to support our amazing language teachers. So all of that has gone into the document that you have in front of you that we're sharing with you today. Want to, on the next slide, just give you some highlights from the guiding principles. And you see them up on the screen here. They're listed as guiding principles on the document. And I would just want to highlight a couple of things here. One is, this vision document represents sort of our ideal state, something that we're striving to, building towards, informing our work and our decisions. It's a living document, so we're constantly taking in information from the community, from research, from what we're hearing from our teachers, from our students, and together we're working to make this vision a reality. And I'm going to ask Anne-Marie Orth to illustrate how this vision can become a reality. She's going to share a couple of little vignettes from the World Language Classroom, just to hopefully bring this vision to life for you. So, Anne-Marie, thank you.
All right. Hi there. So I've been framing this year, so I teach part-time here, Spanish at Casco Bay High School. And I've been framing this year for my students around the idea that learning another language can serve as a window to view and experience another culture. And it also can serve as a mirror reflecting aspects of ourselves. So the best way to acquire another language is to hear input in that language that is comprehensible, compelling, and contextualized. And as a Spanish teacher in this district for 18 years, I know how challenging and rewarding this can be to make it happen in a classroom. So I thought I'd give you some examples. I think I just, is it just
Aaron's the
transportation? Oh yeah, why don't you? Oh, there. Oh, that's what I just said. There you go. All right, so that's fine. You can keep it there. So here are some examples where the target language has been made accessible for students. And thank you to Becca Lynch-Nichols, a teacher here at Casco, for a lot of the photos. So these two students are presenting a recipe for a Spanish soup in Spanish to their peers. So working with Realia makes the learning experience more memorable and creates connections between objects and vocabulary words and other language concepts. So you can do the next one. In this example, Spanish-speaking experts visit world language classrooms to engage with students in an interpersonal and authentic way. And there is our very own Carlos Gomez on the boat presenting. There you go. Slide 4. So this is where a lot of you have probably maybe experienced a world language classroom where you these are students negotiating meaning in another language with each other. And there's usually a lot of awkwardness and giggling, but it's always very fun. And slide number 5. This is definitely one of my personal favorites in the classroom, is having students learn a song in another language, which gives students a real sense of the language and the sound and the culture through its sound and lyrics. So just in conclusion, students are pushing themselves to learn another language by listening to understand, and by taking risks, by speaking another language and making mistakes, and understanding themselves more deeply by understanding other cultures. So thank you. And you're always welcome to come visit me in the classroom. Very fun.
Gracias, Emery. So you saw earlier some of the guiding principles. You have those in front of you. I want to talk a little bit about immersion specifically. And on the next slide, you'll see some of the bullet points that have come from the best practices around language instruction from the language vision. And this speaks to what can be a powerful learning experience. Having students recognize their heritage language, having students immersed in language. That's always what we try to do in the language classroom, so that learning is meaningful. So the language vision highlights the need for supporting heritage languages, for supporting classical and critical languages as that are necessary in a globalized world in the 21st century. It also calls for increased opportunities for research-based immersion programs, elevating primary and literacy skills in the home language, and languages that are representative of our community. So again, going back to some of the larger languages, obviously challenging to do something for 55 languages, but certainly some of our larger languages. So on the next page, here's an update about some key opportunities that we're seeing from our immersion programs at Lyseth and at Lyman Moore. So we're looking. The language vision asks us to look at immersion programs in service of our multilingual learners, to weave in heritage and home languages into world language programming where that is, and also to take some of the key learnings that we've had from our one-way Spanish immersion and help inform our work moving forward. So those are some opportunities that we have regarding immersion programs. There are also some challenges, primarily the one I mentioned before, that we to a certain extent, we need a critical mass for languages, and the other challenge is with so many different languages at different schools that any immersion program work needs to be needs to consider that context of the school and of the language. As always, trying to align all of our programming. Currently, demographically, our current immersion programming is not representative of our school district's demographics, and we're looking to make it as demographically representative as possible. So, over what are our next steps for the remainder of this year and into the first half of next year? So basically over the next 11 months, the year of 2023. We are going to be looking at having some conversations around our curriculum, trying to align our curriculum across our immersion programs at Lyseth and Moore. There's some work that we're doing around phonics and when and how we teach English, starting earlier with English, having Spanish for a greater extent of that experience at the elementary and middle school level. We're looking at some of the assessments. So what can our assessments tell us about our model and where we can make improvements? So over the spring, we're going to be collecting some of the data that you see in front of you to help us to help inform these conversations and to make student voice data and our community embedded in our language vision for immersion. That's at sort of the school level where this exists, immersion. At the district level, which is the next slide, is similar. We're going to continue to collect some data around and make adjustments to our current middle school and high school programming. We have our seal of biliteracy testing coming up in March, mid-March. We will take that information and share that with our principals, with our language teachers, and constantly sort of improve our programming. Our world language vertical team will get back together to analyze some of the community forum feedback and results in order to hopefully help us define some heritage language options. The immersion work group, this is sort of a group that's looking specifically at immersion, plans to meet over the summer after some of the spring data and enrollment numbers have been collected, and we will be developing recommendations to fine tune in the fall and to ultimately come back and share with you, the board, what those recommendations for heritage language programming, for immersion programming, for elementary programming, et cetera. So there's still some good work to be done. Some amazing work has been done already. This is a very dedicated group, a passionate group. I love I was just looking at the front hall here. There was a student talking about their senior expedition around monolingual America and looking at why do we not speak more languages in our country? And I think Portland is in a unique position to elevate language and in many ways has been a leader in languages in the state. But there's more to go, and the work is to me, there's nothing more fun than to speak to language teachers and students and really see those light bulbs go off, and when they start making connections, it's almost like you have an MRI and you can see those connections flashing in their mind. So I'll leave it at that. I know it's late, and you may have some questions. Be glad to answer what I can, and thank you for your time.
All right. Any questions from the board?
Yeah, Board Member Victor.
Thank you so much, Carlos and Anne Marie. I have a couple of questions. One, given that we now have so many Portuguese speakers, and given the part of your vision that talks about are the languages that we teach representing our community, is there an effort to? I know there's some Portuguese now taught at King, but I'm wondering if there's an effort to increase that.
We also have Portuguese instruction at the high schools at Deering, and unfortunately at Portland we weren't able to retain our Portuguese teacher, but we did for a month have Portuguese there. So that seems to be an increasing need, as far as expansion into Portuguese, I think we want to make sure that what we do have right now is meeting outcomes and making an impact. And tough to do in 1 year in a short time, but there's certainly some things that we can learn from that experience. My understanding is that students have been, it's a bit of a transition in some ways, both for students who felt like they had a high level of literacy in Portuguese, and some who were struggling with Portuguese. So it's a wide spectrum that we're trying to serve, and that's part of the analysis. Like who is it that we are serving, and how can we best serve them? I don't know if that answers your question, but I mean, I think Portuguese is a growing need for sure.
And then I had a just specific question, not that you didn't cover today, but I know now at least at King Middle School, where my daughter is a 6th grader, she's been taking French and she's about to switch to Spanish. Whereas my older daughter, picked a language and then took that all throughout. So I'm just wondering the thinking behind that.
Yeah. We've had to, over the last couple of years, make some adjustments to our middle school language programming. King, for a while, offered the same language every day for 3 years consecutively. And due to various cuts in budgeting, we've had to go to every other day. In that sense, all 3 middle schools are aligned. And the idea, there are different language programs that do like an exploratory, like a first year. Spanish, French, Portuguese, whatever. But I think the more effective programming is sort of that immersive everyday experience, go deep into one language, and then the other languages become easier to acquire.
So it's not that it's aligning with our vision, it's that it's a result of the budget realities?
Yes.
Okay. And then with the LISETH Spanish immersion program, are we committing to parents, given that it sounds like we're going to run the program as is for at least this school year and the next school year, which is what I'm hearing?
At least for this coming year, yes.
Are we committing to the families that their students will be able to continue in the program as is throughout elementary school or middle school? Or because as you talked about here, I continue to be concerned about the program because it isn't aligned with the Portland Promise. And so I'm just wondering what kind of ongoing commitment we're making to a program that we know isn't within our vision.
So we, Principal Sarah Goodall shared some of the adjustments that we're making to the enrollment policy for future students and families. So there still is a sibling clause for students who have siblings in the LISEF program. There's also an effort to hold several spots through the spring into the summer and into August for Spanish speakers outside of the LISEF community. These are efforts to ensure that some of our students who can benefit, some of our multilingual learners who can benefit from that immersion program, to have an opportunity to do so, and understanding that their enrollment doesn't always happen at the same time as they're constantly arriving.
And what's the process to identify and recruit those families?
We are sharing with our multilingual intake sort of an explanation of the program, why maintenance of Spanish heritage language, or it's why maintenance of Spanish language is helpful to literacy in English, and all sorts of other cultural and cognitive reasons. There's also an outreach to other principals in elementary across all of the other elementary schools to say that, especially at the upper level, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, where there might be some more spots, that if other schools are feeling like they're at capacity and they have some Spanish speakers who want to be part of something like this, that opportunity exists. So a couple of changes that are trying to align our program with the Portland Promise.
And is that policy in effect now, or that's for the coming school year?
I think that's for for this current second half of the year into the summer. So
there are some Spanish speakers now in the Spanish immersion program.
There are a few, minimal, but there are a couple at the upper, across multiple grades.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to say, reading this vision statement, it's just, it's inspiring. So thank you so much for all of your work.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Can I make one comment also, just to underscore the point when you were asking about the LISEF family expectations? So I shared the letter that Principal Goodall sent to her community with you all. And so she did say in that letter that we're continuing with the immersion program as it's currently designed, with the tweaks that Carlos spoke to pertaining to curriculum and some of these changes in enrollment, but is also making transparent that there's a work group really looking deeply at this, and that there's a commitment to, one, have parents or family members who are interested to serve on that work group, which we had a survey put out for people to apply, and I think we're taking everybody who expressed interest. And that, secondly, we'll continue to communicate transparently. So there was a point at which we were imagining ourselves coming forward with some more significant recommendations for this budget cycle this year. But we've slowed that down a little bit because of our realization of how much community engagement we need to do, especially if anything's going to change. There's a very strong and committed community at LISEF that is really committed to the program as it stands. And so we want to be really thoughtful about, is this in fact aligned with our goals and values? And then if there are changes to be made, let's do this really deliberatively and in a collaborative way. So.
Excellent. Thank you. And I did read that letter. Somehow I don't remember the details, so I apologize.
I'm sure you remember the gist.
Beautiful. Board Member Bryden?
Can you hear me?
No, not really. You're very quiet.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chair. And Carlos, thank you so much for the presentation and for all the really hard work and important work that you're doing. My question is to do with I want to focus on the 7 elementary schools where we're not offering any world language programming right now, and realistically can't anytime soon. I completely understand. My questions are, if you take the budget component out of the equation,
I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about what other challenges there might be, staffing, fitting, world language into the school day, those sorts of things. And also, if you could talk about the pros around, the reasons and benefits to offering world language programming to elementary school children. I hope my questions make sense, and I really appreciate your thoughts.
Thank you. I think so. I'll give it a shot here and then ask Anne-Marie to jump in, and then anybody else. And I think talk about the pros for a moment. So there's all sorts of brain science about use of and learning world language or any other languages, because many of our students already speak another world language. In terms of brain development, in terms of literacy in English, in terms of the social emotional pieces of understanding and opening windows and mirrors to other cultures, one's own culture, some of the things that Anne-Marie highlighted in what this vision might look like in action. The obviously long-term multilingualism has economic and academic and intellectual value across time for students, for families, for our community. I could go on for pros. So the challenges, based on some previous experience, challenges have included how to fit it into a schedule in elementary schools with our content area instruction around literacy, numeracy, science, social studies, et cetera. I think there's, with a lot of really good planning and effective teaching, we can support and learn content and language at the same time. So that would be a challenge that I would be up for. The staffing, just to give you an example, not that this was maybe a little history here. We had third in the latest iteration of elementary school world language programming, which was ended a couple of years ago. We started with third, fourth, and fifth grade. Twice a day, 45 minutes a day, or 3 times a week, 30 minutes a week. And that's what we're hearing, about an hour and a half per week of as continual instruction as possible. We had to cut third grade, so we went to fourth and fifth, and then then it becomes a little bit of a puzzle of sharing teachers and start times, end times. That's where it gets really complicated. So those are some of the challenges. I think a well-designed curriculum that brings in what we hear around Tier 1 instruction, around content instruction and literacy happening at the same time. We can embed language in that, and that's language learning, that's world language learning, English language learning around content. So hopefully that answers your question. I don't know if anything.
It does. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.
Board Member Bondo.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Gomez Carlos. Thank you. I'm a strong advocate for the world languages. And
merci.
Yes, thank you. Merci. But today I have some critics, and I think in the end I have some recommendations. And I think my critiques is on the reading literacy, on the aspect of the world languages. So be a polyglot myself, speaking more than 4 languages, and without knowing how to read on those languages. That's really what is hurting me the most in our Portland Public School. And I try to figure out different strategy. When I see you presenting, is that how can we do best to really encouraging our student who's learning those world language to have the reading aspect to those languages. I have a lot of critiques and comments from communities, then most of those students, they just don't know how to read efficiently on those languages. They can speak. And I see what you've been presenting is a lot of tools that we use in contextual. That's just the best way to learn languages. Building skills, building communication skills, getting connected to other communities and culture is just so amazing. But the reading aspect is just the most important to accelerate the learning strategies. The reading aspect is just the most ways they can have building some background knowledge, building more critical mindset, critical challenges. So I think that I just don't see that one reporting because I try to figure out if we have any data or statistics showing us how many of our readers, how many of the world languages students has improved also on their reading skills and on the reading literacies. That's what I want to see mostly improving the area because I see we have a wide gap for the achievement to the area. And that's my concern. That's my concern. And I want to see how many books then we really pushing our students to go to the library and having a books, bringing it home and reading to that language, French, Portuguese, Arabic, everything that you have presenting. Because for me, it's not only speaking that language, it's reading that language, can building more academic achievement and improving the linguistic skills as well.
Thank you. I think couple of quick thoughts around our language instruction does look at reading, writing, listening, and speaking, and our assessments that we use for the Seal of Biliteracy measures those 4 language domains. I think our reflections is that writing has always been the most challenging aspect for most of our students, but that's something we can dig into a little bit more deeply. Obviously, there's a connection to reading there. We do have, and we've been trying to each year supply multilingual books in our biggest languages across all of our schools. So we're working. Our Department of Language Development works with our librarians to try and have some of those materials that you mentioned. But that's we've learned a lot about literacy in English and in teaching literacy in other languages, and there's still a lot of learning to do. And I think this is a field where we're working with our literacy coaches to get the 660 endorsement to work with our English with our multilingual students to embed that language in that literacy as much as possible. So these are areas that yes, we can and should and need to do better. But I think we as an organization remain curious about what is effective teaching in this area.
Yeah. Thank you so much for recognizing that, because that's something, for years I've been advocating to the law plan, and I really want us to move to that level where we really can be proud of our world languages by adding all those aspects of the reading literacy as well. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to comment on the reading because I agree. Reading is so important. In my world language classroom, we read a book every year. And the balance around doing reading in a world language classroom is like, do I use a book that students can read and understand pretty easily, like 90% reading, or do I use an authentic text? And it's like way harder and they might not understand it. So it's like this balance of like, what kind of reading am I giving my students? And is it more important that they understand what they're reading? Because really we acquire language when we understand what we hear and read. So they might be able to read it and not understand it. But if they can read it and understand it, then they're actually acquiring. And I see this happens with my level 1s and 2s with all the reading we do. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Student Representative Ellis. Yeah, thank you. I can speak on this a little. I was in French for 2 years at Lincoln, and then I was in Miss Orth's class last year. And I can say pretty confidently that I think I have a better understanding of Spanish in terms of literacy now than speaking. And just like my personal experience, we read 2 books, one of which was chosen by ourselves last year, and one of which was with the class. And so I think it's been pretty weaved into the system, at least. I mean, I can only say for my personal class. And I think there's definitely efforts to be made with literacy in the future. But I also want to point out that it's definitely been a pretty big part of at least, my personal classes. Like in the classroom here at Casco, there's children's books and like kind of YA books all written in Spanish up on the wall that are like that we can use and take home at any time if we want. So I think while there is growth to be had, those resources are pretty prevalent.
Thank you. Yeah, Board Member Billy.
I just wanted to reflect on, I guess, just how I personally feel about only having specific choices as languages to learn. So when I came to the US, I spoke 2 languages, and I didn't speak English. And I spoke those 2 languages fluently, and I could also write in them. And because I came here, and obviously we came as refugees and we had to assimilate, and there was like this huge push for assimilation, I learned English I did all I can to learn and speak English. And that caused me to lose one of my languages, and it caused me to basically lack fluency in the other. And I really want to touch on this because I think we don't deeply think about the issues that students of color deal with, especially with language, because language is can be used as an oppressive tool depending on where they're coming from. So for me to not actively understand, giving kids the only option to take Portuguese when they've literally been socially and systematically oppressed by Portugal as a country, and for them to not have the option of speaking their native language, or really having the capacity to be fluent in their native language, because they're being forced to have to take up Portuguese to now coexist in their own space, in their own country. And then to come here and be pushed towards oh, you speak Portuguese, here's a Portuguese country, or here's a Portuguese class. I think that is just really, to me, it's really I don't know what the word is. It's really minimizing the deeper issue of how oppressive language can be, because now they don't even have the opportunity to learn and understand their own language. They're being forced to still prioritize their oppressor's language. And to me, that is just such a deeper issue that nobody else is going to understand or imagine other than that, right? Other than the person that is in that position. So when we talk about equity only works if we're equity only work if equity work is only impactful when it has a conscious decolonizing aspect. So when we're consciously trying to decolonize the things that are oppressing our students, our community, that's when we're actually doing equitable work, not just dealing with the options that we have or creating space for the things that we're given. French, Spanish, and Portuguese are some of the most offered Spanish or language speaking classes. And to me, that is really that doesn't sit well with me, because those are very oppressive languages that have literally colonized half of the world. So to re-traumatize people that are coming from places that are now dealing with those issues, I don't see that as equity, and I don't see that as us actually offering authentic opportunities for people to learn, because we can offer Congolese people a class on Lingala, or we can offer Angolans a class. And I know the structures or like the difficulties to offering that, but I think when we just like hyper focus on the three, white centered languages, it doesn't allow for us to create opportunities for those languages to be taught, or to create opportunities for those languages to be centered, right? White kids can learn languages that are not French, Spanish, or Portuguese, and there can be a curriculum for that. So for me, when we talk about equity, I don't want us to talk about equity under this umbrella of like what is, but under the umbrella of decolonizing and not reharming the kids that are going to be in these spaces. And I've taken multiple language classes. I didn't feel like it was useful for me because literally I already spoke 2 different languages, and that was taken away because of the fact that I had to hyper assimilate to this process to be able to survive. So when we're thinking about these things, I really want us to think about the deeper meaning that students and kids that are not thought about have to actually go to, and the interpersonal things that they're having to hold on to, and the ways in which they're being disenfranchised, even in their own tongue. Like they can't create space to learn their tongue because they have to hyper assimilate to the system to survive. So as educators, as people that are carrying a community, we have to do more than just like go with the status quo, because that is clearly consistently harming people. And we don't want to continuously recolonize people that are trying to decolonize themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Billy.
Thank
you. All right, so the concept of heritage language play space at the elementary level gets at some of that, where students can come and use the language that they feel comfortable with. We've had volunteers, community volunteers, to support the students in that setting. This was something that we did at one school that was at Reiki Elementary School. We've had some after school, in this case, it was French classes taught by teachers who spoke more than French, other languages that they incorporated into their class and made connections to, or, those are 2 instances that I think, 2 opportunities that we can build on and learn from, and certainly what you speak to from your personal experience and sort of a big picture as an organization, as a leader in our community here, that it's important that we I think that's ultimately our challenge here is how do we support all of the languages that our students speak in a systematic way, in a way that is meaningful, in a way that is decolonizing, and in a way that sets them up for success and liberation of their own being. And that's why language is so powerful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, may I ask what languages did you speak?
I spoke Amharic and Nuer. They're sub-tribe languages of East African countries. Yeah, I think what I also wanted to add is not necessarily like centering, obviously, because there has to be the student capacity, but I think more of like trying to shy away from overexposing those countries that have always had that the opportunity for everybody to learn. So maybe switching up or finding ways to introduce other. I know you guys had Arabic, but that was specific to like USM or something like that.
We have an Arabic teacher at Deering High School.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I just think it's like any opportunity, and like a curriculum can be built. There's always the opportunity to talk to people who teach these extensive languages, but I'm just talking more about like finding ways to incorporate, if there's an opportunity, incorporate it, and not always sticking to kind of the traditional things is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you, Board Member Billy. Any other thoughts or questions from the board? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I just had some questions about the transition from middle school to high school for the immersion program. I'm assuming that after 9 years of immersion, pretty much all of the high school curriculum is they're well beyond that. So I'm just wondering what's going to happen.
Yeah. So their high school has multiple entry. Think of it like multiple on ramps to whatever level of Spanish. So a beginning level student to an advanced placement student or honors level student of somebody who's been studying for years, maybe abroad or here, maybe from another district that did have elementary programming. But certainly our students who've gone through elementary and middle school have reached a level that is comparable to what they would need for the seal of biliteracy. So we would encourage them to go for the seal of biliteracy in 9th grade, although they wouldn't receive it until their seniors. Continue studying in-depth, literature or upper level Spanish classes. Maybe take university classes, maybe switch to other languages and get the seal of biliteracy. I think that's very possible that a student could switch to another language and demonstrate that intermediate mid-level of fluency.
Thank you.
Sure.
Wonderful. Any other questions? Yeah, Board Member Yusuf.
Yeah, one quick question. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Carlos. Following up the what Ms. Billy you mentioned, do we have any plan to kind of partner with community organizations for heritage language outside the PPS?
We there are no specific plans to do that, but one of the other hats I wear is being supporting our multilingual learners in multiple languages. So I'm always looking for people who speak other languages, who have an interest in volunteering or being an ed tech or a teacher eventually. So trying to cast a net wide and have as many, we can't do it alone, right? We're not gonna, we're working with Portland Adult Ed, with a couple of other, with USM, a couple of others to just constantly be on the lookout of people who we can grant fund, who we can locally fund, who we can put into existing positions to create opportunities for them to share their expertise in their language and their culture with our students. So if anyone knows of other organizations that we should definitely be working with, the House of Languages and a couple of the other local language institutes we've partnered with in different capacities, looking beyond Portland as well. Yeah.
Can I just, one thing to add there is I think an opportunity that's upcoming is in terms of summer, where we've talked with you all about, the limited ability we might have to run summer the way we've run it historically. And so we're hoping to lean on community partners. And so for a language academy, to Carlos's point, if you know of partners, and I know, Carlos knows some as well, but that's an actual concrete place where we can activate those partnerships that we can then carry through the year. So it's resourced already. So that would be awesome if you have ideas. And that's a place where we could initiate some deeper collaboration with other organizations that, bring that kind of, bring different language skills to partner with.
Yeah, thank you so much. And as you said, the summer is a very important time that, but I think, connected to the summer school plan, summer team, and it didn't go that well. And I was just suggesting that we may have focus on that because sometimes those organizations may have their own grant and just looking for that connection with the Portland Public Schools. So being open to that and reaching out and building that where some sort of agreement with the standardized that we can be evaluated the progress. So that was my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board Member Youssef, Board Member Opperman.
Thank you. I have to agree with Member Bilyeu in that I've spoken with many parents of fairly recent immigrants, particularly from the African continent, who fear their children are losing the language. And I wonder, as there are the adults who come who still have the language, the elders, much like we did grandparents program and over the years, and might be a conversation at least place that people could continue, much like with the children, but continue it into older because they are. You're right. They are losing their language.
Yeah, and that's a central piece to our Allow plan. Speaks to that multilingualism as an asset, maintenance of one's own primary language, and increased literacy in multiple languages. But yeah, no, I think that's something that for generations, that language loss is an erasing of identity, unfortunately.
Yes. Thank you so much to both of you for being here and talking about your work and what's happening within the district. And I think it's already been said, but just like how visionary this vision statement is. And I'm just so excited to see us move towards that vision. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay, so we're going to move into personnel.
Sorry, Sarah, I just had a couple questions. Sorry, I just remember that the middle school report was going to be on today's agenda. Was that changed?
That was the last meeting.
Was
it a couple meetings ago?
Yeah, because it was moved because I specifically remember it being moved.
Yeah, it was moved. It got bumped one meeting and happened.
You were there.
Yeah, it happened. It was originally scheduled.
Oh my God. It was the cell phone thing. Sorry. I was thinking, I thought it was going to be about the Lyman Moore, the protest. Sorry. I was thinking different. I thought it was going to be an update about what was going on there. So
That's okay. We'll circle back afterwards because I can share the PowerPoint and the pieces around restorative practice and that were happening. And also Superintendent Nally, we can loop you in as well.
Yeah. Okay. And then just the other question that I wanted to, I guess, reiterate is I did ask, this was like maybe last year, about the personnel issues of like us trying to get to a point of if we can understand like a line of disciplinary actions, just so we can have more information on like the history of the personnel or the person or like, I'll bring that up in executive session, but I just wanted to reiterate that just so it doesn't get lost.
Yeah, no, and I have definitely noted that line of thinking. And I think as we get further into this transition and kind of like figuring out all of our systems, I want to see what we can do about that.
Okay.
So thank you for bringing that up again. Beautiful. And Ben, or Board Member Grant, did you want to say something as we enter into personnel issues?
Yeah, this is going to be where my new role starts to change a little bit what I'm able to do here on the board. We are still sorting through a lot of complex issues, but for tonight anyway, and in an abundance of caution, I'm going to recuse myself from the votes on the two personnel matters, just so you're aware going in. And we'll have an opportunity to discuss this at a future executive session, I believe you said earlier, correct?
February 7th.
Just letting everyone know.
Beautiful. Thank you, Board Member Grant. So now moving into consideration and action to approve a personnel item, the election of teacher candidates. Would you like to speak to that, Chris?
Yes, thank you very much. So tonight you're being asked to approve the superintendent's recommendation for 3 new hires. You'll be voting on these educators in 2 separate groups. The first is one year only educator, and the second group is 2 regular educator hires. With that, I'll turn the mic back over to the board chair. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. So with that said, is there a motion for the consideration and action to approve election of teachers, the probationary teachers? Is there a motion? Thank you, Board Member Youssef. Is there a second? Like second. Thank you, Board Member Biliou. Any questions on the motion?
I just want to question on the educator. We're talking about teachers or ed tech specifically?
They're only teachers.
Teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Okay. I don't see, let me just double check Zoom. Sorry, lots of screens tonight. And there's no public comments on personnel items. So by roll call vote, please indicate whether you're in favor of these personnel items. So Superintendent Townsend, can you please call the roll?
Yep. Ms. Biliou?
Yes.
Ms. Bondo?
Yes.
Ms. Bryden?
Yes.
Ms. Figdor?
Yes.
Dr. Opperman?
Yes.
Just for the record, Mr. Grant, I have recused. Yep. Ms. Russell Better?
Yes.
Mr. Youssef?
Yes.
Ms. Ellis?
Yes.
Mr. Haymond?
Yes.
And Chair Lentz?
Yes. So the motion passes with Board Member Grant recusing, everyone else voting affirmatively, with the students voting with the majority. We're going to move on to the second item, which is the consideration and action to approve teacher candidates for 1 year only. Is there a motion? Board Member Opperman, is there a second? Beautiful. Board Member Biliou, was that a second? Thank you very much. And Chris, was there anything that you wanted to speak to this? You got them both at the first, right? Okay, beautiful. All right, any questions on the motion? No? Beautiful. There's no public comments on personnel items. So by roll call vote, please indicate whether you are in favor of these or this personnel item. Superintendent Townsend, will you please call the roll?
Yep. Ms. Biliou?
Yes.
Ms. Bondo?
Yes.
Ms. Bryden?
Yes.
Ms. Figdor?
Yes.
Mr. Grant?
Recused.
Dr. Opperman?
Yes.
Ms. Russell Better?
Yes.
Mr. Youssef?
Yes.
Ms. Ellis?
Yes.
Mr. Haymond?
Yes.
And Chair Lentz?
Yes. So the motion passes with Board Member Grant recusing himself, everyone else voting in favor, with the students voting with the majority. So thank you for that. And now we're going to enter into executive session and pursuant to 1 MRSA Section 4056D to discuss negotiations with the Portland Administrators Association. And we will adjourn from executive session after that. So do I have a motion to enter executive session?
So moved.
Enter. Yes. Okay. So Board Member Russell Better, was that a motion or a question?
No, it was a motion.
And then a second, please. Beautiful. Board Member Opperman. Let's see. And we vote on that? Yes, we vote on that to go in the second room, but we don't have to do roll call. Is that right? Or do we do? let's do roll call just in case. So by roll call vote, please indicate if you're in favor of moving into executive session. Mr. Superintendent Townsend, will you please call the roll? Thank you very much.
Ms. Bilyeu,
Yes.
Ms. Bondo,
Yes.
Ms. Bryden,
Yes.
Ms. Figdor,
Yes.
Mr. Grant,
I'm also going to recuse myself from this vote.
Dr. Opperman,
Yes.
Ms. Russell Better,
Yes.
Mr. Youssef,
Yes.
Zealous,
Yes.
Mr. Haymond,
Yes.
and Chair Lentz.
Yes, so the motion passes with Board Member Grant recusing himself, with the rest of the board members voting affirmatively and the students voting with the majority. So at 9:29, we're going to move into executive session.
Yep.
Going to take the motion?
Well, we did come out of executive session. We already did that one while you were gone. And then
No, is there a motion to adjourn the
Yes,
meeting? Thank you, Board Member Bilyeu. Is there a second?
second the motion.
Thank you, Youssef. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Perfect. 10 p.m., 10:06 p.m.
10:06